To order, and we'll open the meeting. First item on the agenda is public comment. Any public comment? No public comment. Next item is a review of minutes for May 1st, 2019. What's the pleasure of the board with regard to those minutes?
Motion to approve the minutes as presented, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Motion is made to approve the minutes as presented. Is there any discussion? There being none, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? Motion's carried. Next item is the common victualer's license for mobile Italian ice cart. We received an application from Robert Dumays, doing business as Big Frankie's Italian Ice, to operate a mobile home cart at Parks and Recreation events in Clinton. Is Mr. Dumays here? If you could come up, sir, to the desk right there. Sit down in front of one of the microphones and tell us your name and address, and then tell us a little bit about your proposed business.
Yeah, my name is Robert Dumas. I live in Charlton, Massachusetts, and purchased a little business that is a mobile Italian ice cart from some people here in Clinton. It has a cart with an umbrella and some signs and everything that you're really looking for. And the product that is sold, you go to New Jersey and it's a self-contained, like it would be like ice cream, but it's non-dairy. It comes in 5-gallon containers, and really the nature of the business is to scoop it out and to serve it and sell it. And it's really event-driven, but that's
Okay.
really what it is about.
Any questions from members of the board?
I just had one that, is it during Parks and Recreation events, or are you doing more like throughout the town, Monday through Sunday type stuff, or?
From here, it's really parks and recreation events.
Okay.
And there are some places that the folks that we purchased it from have used, so.
Yeah.
And it'll be other towns besides Clinton too, but we want to take advantage of the pre-existing business. It'll be event-driven at other places too, and we'll have to get permits from each individual town.
Have you done other towns in the past? with
No,
that?
it's brand new.
You're brand new?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a pre-existing business in Clinton, but,
Okay. Yeah.
they might have had one business too many, and,
Yeah. No, I think it's a good idea. I mean, I wish you the best of luck with it.
good, thank you.
Absolutely. That's all I had, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Carey.
have you spoken to the Parks and Rec about this?
Yes.
Okay. Because I know we've had complaints
Yeah.
from them before about competing businesses, which
Yeah.
I'm sure
Everyone we have spoken to, all the departments in the town of Clinton, I'm telling you, couldn't do anything more to accommodate. It was a pleasure.
It's good to hear.
Yeah.
great. Thank you.
Okay. No other questions from members of the board? This is a public hearing, right? Yeah, so it's a public hearing, so we have to invite anyone who, other than Mr. Dumays, who's in favor of this application to come up and testify. Appears to be no one, and we have an opportunity for those who are opposed. Also appears to be no one. With that, the testimony is concluded. We'll close the public hearing. What does the board wish to do with regard to this common victualer's license?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we grant the common victual license to the mobile Italian ice cart, Robert Dumays, doing business as Big Frankie's.
Second.
Motion is made and seconded to grant the common victualer's license to Robert Dumays, doing business as Big Frankie's Italian Ice. There any discussion? There being none, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed, motion's carried. Congratulations and good luck to you.
Good luck.
Thank
Thanks.
you very much.
Next item on the agenda is a Class 2 motor vehicle dealer license hearing for 678 Main Street. The Board of Selectmen received an application for expansion of a Class 2 motor vehicle dealer license from Bob Bayless, doing business as Main Street Automotive, to the abutting property at 678 Main Street. There is a current license on that property for 10 vehicles. Mr. Bayless is leasing that property and would like to keep the number of cars for that site for an addition to his business. Is Mr. Bayless here?
Present.
Okay. First step is we'll hear from you guys about what you'd like to do.
Basically, I own the property next door. I lease that. I have a 5-car license for my property, and there was a 10-car license for that property. I would like to combine the two for a 15-car license. We'd like to increase the sales of the cars that we've been selling.
Okay. That's it?
That's it.
Okay. Any questions from members of the board?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
so is all 15 cars gonna go on one side or the other, or is it gonna be spread out?
The 15 cars will be between both pieces of property. We run a repair shop as well, all right? And so we'll be repairing cars as well as selling, all right? I'd like to increase what I have. I have a license for 5.
Yep.
All right, and I've kept it to 5 cars for sale, but I would like to increase that so that we can have more cars.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so I mean, was there any comment from town council or?
Well, the only comment, if he's looking to expand the current license he has on that property, fine, but you really should keep the properties are owned by 2 different entities. So you should keep the licenses separate, so if he wants to get you then really would have 2 licenses. If he's looking to have the license for this, was it he owns 676?
I own 676, which is 3/4, it's 3 times as big as 678, and I only have a 5-car license. 678 has a 10-car license. What I would like to do is increase the license, all right, at 676 to 15 cars.
Okay.
But I want the town to understand that I will be parking on both pieces of property. If you've seen it lately, there was a fence that divided it. The fence has been removed. We've cleaned the whole place up, and it looks like one big, huge area.
Right. But the problem being legally, it's 2 different owners. I don't see how you can have one license for a parcel that's owned by 2 different owners. In other words, you really, each parcel should have its own license. Now, sounds like he can expand 676, he's only got 5 now.
Right, yeah.
I mean, that's not my call, but it sounds like you get the room there to go to 15. But if he's also gonna be using the other property, which he's leasing, but has a different owner, obviously, that license, that should be a different license for that property. This is a different circumstance than the one we had 2 weeks ago, where it was the same owner for both properties, 1 parcel.
So we got two parcels. Bob, you own one, and then someone else owns the other lot?
I have a 5-year lease with an
Okay,
option to purchase it,
okay.
and the lease goes for another 5 years until the environmental issue's cleaned up. It's the old gas station that I ran.
Yeah,
And I bought all the property around it, right? Built a new building,
yeah,
okay? And I got a 5-car license.
right.
Now, when they came up and requested a license for the other property and got a 10-car license, all right? I never bothered to come in and say, I think I should get more cars. I didn't bother, because, I don't deal in a lot of cars. But now that I've leased the property, I've expanded the repair business.
Right.
I'm also expanding the cars that I sell. So I'm requesting that I get a 15-car license for 676 Main Street, which is
Yeah,
the
I
shop
mean-
that I own.
I think you could expand, if you have 676, you could expand it, expand it from 5 to 15 for 676, correct?
Yeah.
You can do
That's
that.
what I'm asking, but
Yeah.
I'm not, I want the town to know that I'm
10
gonna be
more cars.
parking the cars in the whole area, which includes 6, 7, 8. I'm not gonna keep all the cars for sale in front of the repair shop.
But if that was the case, then 678
Still has 10.
wouldn't have a license. In
Right.
other words, you'd have to have 2 licenses. You have to have 1 for 676, 1 for 678, because they're 2 different owners. I
Right.
understand he's leasing 678, but so be it. You could have a license for 676, you could expand that to 15. But then if he's gonna be parking 5 of those cars on 678, 678 should have a license for 5 cars. It's
Right.
a different owner. I mean, that's how you can issue 1 license for 2 parcels that have different owners.
Yeah, you can't do it, right?
I mean, the lease could be terminated, and he owns 1 property, but he doesn't own the other property, he has a lease.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Bob, do you have a sense of how many cars will be parked on your original property and how many you're proposed to park on
On
the
my
rented?
property that completely surrounds 6, 7, 8, okay? I've had up to 75 cars on there when we have our Miata event.
Right, but do you have any idea of how many, the distribution of parking on those 2 parcels of cars for sale?
I could put 75 to 100 cars on both parcels.
Okay, but you're requesting a total count of 15.
15 cars to be sold.
Of those 15, how many do you think, on average, would be on 676, and how many would be on 678? Just a ballpark. Of those 15, 7 and
10 to 12 on 676.
Three on the other.
So,
I mean,
So-
technically,
so-
I could keep
You
all
prefer
the
to
cars
have-
for sale on 676 if I had to, and just keep the cars that are being repaired on 678.
what would you like to do? Of the 15 cars, what would be the, just a ballpark average of, would it be 5 and 10? Would it be,
12 and 3?
So you'd like to have 10 on 6, 7, 8.
So flip them?
Okay.
I'd really rather,
Okay.
I'd like to have them on the other property, only because the repair business is there, and people are coming and going. I'm trying to keep it open, all right, so that we don't get any jam-ups on the street, that there's plenty of room for people pulling in for their inspection stickers, their oil changes,
Okay, so
and their repairs.
so you would like to maintain your existing license at 5 and acquire a new license for 10
On 678.
on 678? Is that?
Yes.
Okay.
but that's not what we have here,
Okay.
All right.
Well,
This says
Right?
there is a current license for 10.
Yeah, and
but that's not, he doesn't hold that license.
Oh, okay.
That business is closed.
Right.
So can we transfer
So-
that?
But there is a current, Mr. Chair, if I could, there is a current license there. The gentleman who has that license has indicated that he's not doing business there, so he would turn that back in if another license was issued. And the board, I believe, could issue 2 licenses to the same company, and the company wouldn't have to get double bonds. They would just be holding 2 licenses. I don't know what that means as a business sense to Mr. Bayless, in terms of, with the registry and state requirements, but he could hold those 2 licenses side by side with his same business that, under your business name.
Mr. Chairman?
yes.
Bob, would us issuing you a license for 10 cars at 678 Main Street and allowing you to keep the license for 5 on the other parcel meet your needs?
Yes.
Thank you.
Then my question is, can we do that at this meeting, given that it appears,
That's exactly what appears here.
that's
That's
exactly
exactly
what
what's
appears here? Okay, oh, all right, so we'll be giving a new license? Okay, all right.
Yeah, I think that's what the original request. I think if it wasn't legally possible, then he was gonna see if he could put them all on the one site. But by using both sites, you're not supposed to have unregistered cars on a site without a license.
Right.
So that's what causes the problem.
Okay, all right. Well, that's a relief. Okay, so that seems to be done. Do you guys have anything more to say? Okay, this being a public hearing, we would invite up anyone who wishes to speak in favor of this request. Appears to be no one, and we'll invite up anyone who wishes to speak against it. Again, there appears to be no one. We'll close the public hearing. And what's the pleasure of the board with regard to this request for a dealer license?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to grant Mr. Bayless a license for 10 vehicles at 678 Main Street, knowing that he's going to continue and maintain the other license for 5.
I'll second.
Motion's made and seconded to grant a license to Mr. Bayless for 10 cars at 678 Main Street. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Chair.
Can you just make that subject to the other, because there is an existing license out there for 6, 7, make it subject to that license being turned in.
Oh.
Otherwise, we'll have 2 licenses.
Mr. Chairman, I amend the motion to include that stipulation.
Yep, okay. So now the motion is amended to include the stipulation that the license would take effect when the previous license is turned in.
I'll second.
And that's seconded. Is there any discussion on that? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And the motion's carried. There you go, Mr. Bayless. I
Can I
wish you
ask-
luck,
Can I ask one question?
certainly.
Has that license ever been renewed?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Yes, Mr. Chair, it does, they are at annual renewal time unless there is a problem highlighted by the zoning agent. Generally, licenses are renewed by the board every year in January.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Just a question for town council. Can this board revoke that previous license with the knowledge that Mr. Bayless is the tenant on the property and the license is invalid?
Revoke it subject to a hearing, though. If you're
Yeah, you'd have to have
gonna, if he's gonna voluntarily turn it in, which it sounds like he is, it sounds like he's not doing business down there anyway, but if that is a valid license right now that the owner for 678 has, and you're gonna revoke it, he's entitled to a hearing. So
Right.
it may come to that if he doesn't voluntarily turn it in.
And he did put together a letter stating that, in writing, and that the current owner did say that he is not using this license anymore. So if he did turn it in, I guess it would be grounds for the board to hold that hearing.
But basically, he's got to turn it in.
Okay, my question was, he's told me that he never even paid for it this year. I was there in January, I paid for my license, all right? Had he even paid to renew his license?
That's something we can check the records on that, see, yeah.
So that's where we are. When he turns in his license, you'll be all set.
Or if he hasn't renewed it?
Or if he hasn't renewed it. Okay?
Okay, thank you
All
very
right,
much.
well, congratulations. I hope it works out well.
Appreciate it.
Next item on the agenda is Fuller Field bleachers with Matt Kobus, and we're going to table that as that has been handled with the Finance Committee, and Fuller Field is going to
Is that right?
co-sponsor, is going to co-sponsor that warrant article for the
That's not our
bleachers.
understanding.
Okay, you tell us.
Okay, the Finance Committee
Oh, that's right, too.
has
That's right.
agreed to put $28,000 in the facility department's capital fund for next year, specifically allocated towards purchasing bleachers for Fuller Field. The warrant articles are citizens petitions. There's no way for Fuller Field to co-sponsor those articles at this point, or to even be involved in that whole process. And where it's a town appropriation, we felt that it would be better to put that money into, under the supervision of town department.
Okay,
And we did not vote to do anything related to the storage for a private youth organization. So
Right.
those two articles still will appear on the warrant.
but the $28,000 will be put into the facilities director budget for purchase of bleachers. Okay, and I must say, Mr. Conley did tell me that before the meeting, but I'm getting older every day.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Just quickly, I was looking forward to having a conversation with Fuller Field tonight, but, and I realize this might be shouting into the wind, but once, I'm sure, our amicable town meeting is finished, I'd love the opportunity to speak with anyone from Fuller Field about their long-term vision. I saw them on Channel 5 on Friday about plans for expansion of the baseball field, and I'd love to be caught up on all the exciting things that are going on there.
Okay. Next item on the agenda are livery license renewal. The Board of Selectmen has received the following application for the annual livery license from Mr. Gordon Salisbury, doing business as Clinton Livery, from 637 Water Street in Clinton. What is the pleasure of the board?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded to grant the livery license to Mr. Gordon Salisbury. Is there any discussion? There being none, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed, motion's carried. Next item on the agenda is the 2019 annual town meeting draft warrant. Rather than going strictly by warrant number, we have a number of people here to talk about some of the warrant articles. And so Mr. Ward has requested that we start with the library director, who is here, to talk about a couple of warrant articles for the library. So if you come, sit down, say who you are, and which warrant articles are yours? Do you know what numbers?
I don't know the numbers.
Oh, how about you, Michael?
Yeah, well, the numbers have all just changed with the most recent draft, so let's look it up quickly. They do have an article for $7,500 for a heating and cooling system. However, as an FYI, the Finance Committee is looking to put that in the facilities budget as well, so that it wouldn't be a standalone article, that it could be something that the new facilities department would oversee. So that could be removed by the board when you get to that point. And the other article is for some bylaw changes, which is Article 36.
Very good. So Article 36, because I thought you could do your presentation, and then the board could go ahead and
Thank
take
you.
its position on the article, one way or the other. So Article 36.
All right.
Name and address, and tell us about Article 36.
I will do that. So Article 36 is a request by the Board of Trustees to update the Board of Trustees bylaws. Because the last time they were updated was 1914, and since that time, Mass General laws concerning libraries have changed, and so they updated the bylaws to sort of follow the Mass General laws governing libraries. And that's basically, they've gone from six sections to 3 sections, and they're a little more in line with what is recommended by the state.
Okay, so basically, this is an effort to make the existing bylaws consistent with state law.
Yes,
Okay.
that is
What are
it.
the specific changes?
What's that?
What are the specific changes?
Yeah, is there a Reader's Digest of what's different from what's happening now?
Well, some of them, well, do you have the old bylaws in
Yeah,
front
we
of you?
have. No, we don't have the
You don't,
old-
okay, well, so,
The article, if you look in the Article 36, the first part of it has the existing
Oh, okay.
article.
First six.
So as an example, Section 6 gives a specific amount of money that needs to be at least expended, $2,500, and you can't really run a library on $2,500. So the trustees, as an example, changed it to be a reasonable amount of money. Annually appropriate and expend money for the support, care, and maintenance of the library, as opposed to giving a specific number. And other things are, for instance, doesn't change how they're elected. That stays the same. But the trustees have, as recommended by the state, they've changed the bylaws to say the trustees will appoint a director who will take care of the daily maintenance of the library, as opposed to having the trustees take care of the daily maintenance of the library.
Okay. All right,
Okay?
okay?
No other questions?
Yes.
Yeah, just, so as far as the governance or day-to-day operation or day-to-day experience of the public in the library, would they see any change in
They
how
will
it's-
not know, they won't see any change, no.
Okay.
Nothing will change in the way the library is run, because basically, right now, the trustees are running, are
Going
sort
by
of
this already.
following the Mass General laws
practices.
anyway. They're just making it so that it's official.
Great. Will there be somebody at town meeting to speak on this if there are questions?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
You might have to call me down from the gallery, but I will be there. Thanks.
All right. So, seeing we're on it, what is the wish of the board with regard to Article 36?
Do we want to do these à la carte, or?
I would just do it while, we're talking about it.
Sure. Would you want a motion?
Yes.
Motion to accept Article 36 as written?
Second.
Motion made to accept Article 36 as written. Is there any discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? Motion's carried. We have with us this evening the Beta Group. They are the group that has been working with the town in terms of new lighting and sidewalks, et cetera, for High Street, and that is Article 17, and it is $4.5 million.
Thank you.
And so I will turn it over to the Beta Group for a short presentation.
Okay, good evening. My name is Tom Laughlin with the Beta Group. Also with me is Eric Galley. And we're here tonight to talk about the downtown lighting and roadway improvements project on both High Street and Church Street. Scope of our project includes lighting improvements. We get into some of the particulars on all of these. Sidewalk improvements to enhance safety, crossing the street, walking along the street, walkability, meeting and exceeding ADA compliance, some roadway geometry, which is some basic curb line movements that are going to help to slow down traffic and improve ADA compliance as well. And then also to create a vibrant, engaging downtown that's going to help build some economic interest in bringing out more business and more activity. Project limits that we've been talking about with, I should say, there is a downtown committee that we've been working with. We've gone over a number of different issues. We've held to these project limits all the way through our discussions. Basically, the limits are from Union Street all the way to the end of High in this section, down to Water Street, and then Church Street from the Town Hall all the way down to School Street. Some of the existing issues out on the roadway. I believe this project was, the reason to kind of consider this was all brought about because of lighting. And as you can see from some of these photos, starting up on the right and moving clockwise here. A lot of trees obscuring the existing lights, making it difficult, to get down to that sidewalk level and make people feel comfortable. A lot of glare and poor quality of light in that lower photograph. This kind of middle shot here showing a real hot spot or an area where it's overlit and not uniform in a sense. As you look down the rest of the street, there's no lighting. And then the last photograph is actually a group of probably 5 or 6 people walking along the sidewalk with only that single light over off in the distance. So you can see how difficult it is to make out figures, to kind of see where you are going and understand the path that you're on. Some other issues out on the street, not uncommon with downtown areas. But again, starting up in that upper right-hand corner and working clockwise, narrowness of the sidewalk in general, ADA compliance across all of the sidewalks out there. There's probably almost every stretch of the sidewalk is probably out of compliance with current regulations. ADA, I know the job was built in the early 90s and was compliant at that time, but as we move forward, those rules and regulations have changed. So very narrow sidewalks down here. They do not meet the minimum widths for 2 people to pass over a distance of 180, 200 feet. A lot of alleyways and connecting roads and driveways that come into High Street with very steep slopes. And as it comes across the sidewalk area, that slope exceeds the cross slope that's allowed, and those will have to be corrected. The middle picture is down on the end of Union Street. That has kind of a compound cross slope where the user and the path of their travel is heading down a slope, and then at the same time walking along a cross slope. So very difficult for many able-bodied people, but someone in a wheelchair would have an extremely difficult time trying to traverse that area. And then also curb ramps and crosswalks. This is a picture of an example of an able-bodied person being able to use this to step off of this curb, but of course in a rainstorm it would be a very difficult move to jump into the puddle in a sense and make it across. So to kind of clean these up and enhance them so that they're accessible by everybody, not only someone in a wheelchair. This is not for folks who who need the use of a wheelchair, but if you think about all of us, as we get older, we're all gonna need these things. Moms and dads with babies and carriages, and just anyone that needs that aid of, taking an extra step or walking a distance to make it easier for them. Existing drainage issues out on the roadway. Up on the right again, going clockwise, we have a tremendous amount of runoff that comes off of these alleys and streets down onto High Street, and we think modifying the drainage system a little to collect that as quickly as possible would be the best solution. Right now it comes off a lot of these alleys and it travels in the gutter for considerable lengths, 200-300 feet in the gutter to get down into a single catch basin sometimes. There's other areas where there was a drain installed on the original job that's been clogged for some time. I wouldn't even guess how many years. And it's now, what's happened is water collects in some of those gutter lines to get drainage structures in there that would bring it into a closed system and get it off of the road. Both just an inconvenience after a rainstorm, but also in the winter, if that were to freeze and refreeze, it becomes a difficult area for people to park and get out of their car. The middle picture here, this is a picture of the gutter line out there. A lot of debris and sediment, sands. Because it does not have structures to get collected into, it's collecting in the gutter. I don't know if this is actually growing grass or whether it's just grass that's been picked up in the storm and kind of moved into these areas, but either way you can see the deformation in the pavement. A lot of it's because of the sitting water. Last picture, this has been fixed. I think it was fixed probably 6 or 7 months ago, but it's a picture that kind of shows the health of the system. It's aging, and there are different other items out there that need to be looked at. We're actually tomorrow pulling a lot of these covers, both on the manholes and the catch basins, to get a better look at the condition of the system. We'll be with one of Chris's staff members so that we can witness it together, look at maybe deterioration that they've seen in the past, or whether it's worsening or anything like that. As far as the plan, I've kind of blown up a couple of shots just to highlight some of the changes. They're not big changes, and again, they're focusing on enhancing downtown Clinton and not changing the way it gets used, but enhancing it and dressing it up and making it more compliant. I think the biggest two issues at this location are at the intersection of High Street and Union Street, extending some curbs in this area so that the crosswalks become a little bit shorter, reduces the amount of time the pedestrian spends on the roadway, gets them further out into the roadway edge so that the vehicle can see them and they can see the vehicle. It also, coming down Union Street, it would slow people down and force them to kind of come to a little bit more, a much slower speed and make that turn rather than kind of the sweeping radius that's there today. If anyone has any questions while I'm on a slide, please just, yeah.
I was just going to say, particularly that intersection, as you're coming down Union Street, heading towards St. John's, but making the right onto High Street, people make that right at a very high speed, including myself, I have to say. Once we discussed it at the committee meeting, I noticed one time I was coming down and, I took the corner at a pretty good rate of speed because you can.
Yeah, right,
So
exactly.
what we're doing here is making the corner a little sharper, so you have to slow down to make it.
Yeah,
And thus,
we have seen generally on the rest of High Street, people are pretty respectful of the speed, but it's these gateways and entryways that we want to try to bring their attention that the area is changing and they're entering into a place that we want them to be a little more respectful of the pedestrians and the activities that are going to be going on.
One question I had is there,
Yep.
you guys look at like maybe putting signage at those busy intersections, also those LED signage where, it says like pedestrian crossing or something like that. A few, 20, 30 feet down, 50 feet down, the intersection, to have people, they see that, they slow down.
So they make a lot of different types of signing that has, a crosswalk symbol on it,
Yeah.
that's bordered by some
Some have the
flashing
LED now,
lights.
the link and stuff that catch people's eyes.
Yeah, there are.
Pretty effective.
They are, yeah, and they're regulated though on their placement. So we could look at this location to make sure that it fits its use, because what we don't want to do is put that sign here in the wrong place or improperly install it, and then have you install it somewhere else in town, and people just kind of ignore it because, well, there's one of those uptown, and, you know, the thing's always on, and it's, you know, and they
Yeah,
just
just
start
thinking-
to ignore.
Not
Yeah,
only, not only the local people, just people coming through, I mean, that's a busy road, Union Street seems to be very. there's
Yeah,
a lot of
absolutely,
traffic,
yeah.
very 62.
And it's a very wide road too.
Yeah.
And that's, so these curbs, we don't think are gonna impede the traffic, but just kind of bring their attention to an extended curb. This section here, the intersection of High Street and Church Street, the three, starting up on the right and moving clockwise, those three curb extensions are there today. Basically following that exact same curb line. Up in the upper left corner of the upper left quadrant of the intersection, that right now is essentially painted lines, what we would call gore lines that are telling people that this is a no parking area. But what we're suggesting is that we extend that curb line out so that, well, one, it's clear there's no parking. It gives a little more opportunity for people to be able to meet and talk and, or rest and stop after coming up Church Street from the hill. But also, again, shortening these crosswalks across High Street and allowing us to bring the crosswalks from Church Street closer to High Street so that vehicles can kind of climb the hill a little bit more and have a little more sight distance left and right at this intersection. So that's the whole concept here. It's mostly been formed already, but we, enhancing that corner, we think is an opportunity.
Also, correct me if I'm wrong, as I often am. These lights are programmable so that they can be at one level along the street, but it's my understanding they'll be brighter at these intersections.
Yeah, so let me say that the examples of lighting, the yellow on that black post is really just designating location in this graphic, and showing that will be a light that'll cast light. This is not showing us distribution, and in a minute we're going to talk about distribution with these two types of fixtures, and in changing the distribution pattern of the fixtures in those crossing areas to cast more light and intensify the light in these crossing areas so that there's more visibility for the pedestrian and the vehicle approaching them and stuff like that. And Eric will get into a lot of those details that, different ways of enhancing that. Let's see. This is an idea that we've been talking about. It's a new crosswalk at Pierce Place and Pond Court. Pierce Place enters into High Street on the lower portion of the slide. Pond Court is on the upper portion of the slide, coming in perpendicular. There is a lot of municipal parking in the back of these buildings, accessing through two sections of Pond Court and then Ring Road a little further down. But this would be an opportunity where people put parking in the back, be it employees or folks visiting Clinton, would have an opportunity to come up Pond Court and essentially enter into High Street and give them a crossing at that location and allow them to go left and right on either side of the street. There's a decent distance between Church Street and the current existing crossing. That's a little further down at Pierce Place, so we think this is a location that would help, make the whole downtown a little more accessible. This is the next location here, Prospect and Richardson Place. I'm sorry, this is Prospect, and that is the other section of Ring on the other side there. Same thing, what we would call, this isn't necessarily mid-block, but a crossing that would get people, again, a little further out into traffic to be able to look left and right, have that recognition with the driver that I'm here, have the driver be able to pick them up and see them, and make that crossing a little safer. And then this is our last slide from Richardson Place, which is an alley down here on the lower end of the slide, coming into High Street down to Water Street. This area here, today, the cars on the upper portion of High Street, they currently park diagonally. And this is the area where we also highlighted very narrow sidewalks. And those narrow sidewalks are on both sides of High Street. And as you turn the corner from Water Street, taking a right on Water Street onto High Street, there is no parking all the way up to the driveway that goes down into the lower area, the plaza down below. And that's because those cars stick out a little bit too far when they park diagonally. So we've used these curb extensions to protect parking, widened the sidewalks so that we can get some light posts, still have an accessible sidewalk width, and used parallel parking for the entire length of that side of High Street, and included one more space down by the old gas station that the town currently owns in front of that parcel. And by doing that, we end up with the exact same amount of parking spaces that you have there today, but we've been able to widen the sidewalks on both sides to make them more like the other end of High Street that has very, very wide sidewalks. They're not going to be as wide, but they're going to get more width to make them more comfortable. It's tough walking down in that area, especially passing someone and everything else.
Do you know how wide are they gonna get from where they are now?
It's about 2.5 feet on each side. Yeah, it goes from about a 5 foot to almost an 8 foot wide sidewalk.
Nice, okay.
Why don't I have Eric jump in here if you're going to talk about these lighting cross sections, and we can move into fixture types and whatnot.
So in the work with the committee, as you saw in the plan, we're working on placement of the light posts, and what we found is they work in a pattern that's nearly opposite each other. So instead of a staggered pattern, we're able to put them down the street in an opposite position. So this is a cross section of High Street. And what it shows is what the sort of current solution looks like, which is it's about a 16.5 foot pole, and then what's called the luminaire, that's the lantern at the top. A couple different options on that, which I'll show you in a minute. We've made provisions for there to be American flags hanging out into the street. Those can be put on for special events or left on for the summer if you like. We've also made provisions to be able to hang wreaths, and those wreaths could be illuminated because the light poles will have receptacles on them. So holiday lights, wreath lights, things like that could be done if you chose to do so. On the back side of the pole, on the sidewalk side, there's provisions for banner arms. So that's the sort of the new graphic, and the banner arm would stick out sort of over the sidewalk. And we also have the ability to put planters on those poles if that's something that the community is interested in terms of greening them up a little bit and having hanging plants. So those are kind of the main components of the poles themselves. And I want to talk for a minute about the luminaire. There's two different styles. Does the next slide just show the two luminaire tips?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, sort of two different styles. The one on the right in the slide is probably the one you're a little more familiar with. That's sort of the more traditional kind of globe. Actually, we'll put that one on first. And so that's what you have in some places now in downtown. Nelson Street has a fixture that's very similar to this, whether this top is solid or whether the top is sort of open like this. It has certain characteristics. One of the features of this style of light is it has this polycarbonate lens, or this is what the globe is itself. And it looks fluted, but what that is it's like prismatic, the way that the polycarbonate lens is formed, and so it throws the light in a specific sort of orientation. What we've been doing, working with you, is thinking about LED lights. So typically they're very low profile, very thin. It's not a true bulb, and I'll show you on the other one. What happens is those LEDs would sort of be at the center point of this, and normally they would shine sort of down and out to the sides. What happens with the polycarbonate lens is it also, because the prismatic effect sort of reflects some light upward, so it creates a little bit more of a glow. And if you look at the image, the slide on the right, you can sort of see that glowing orb. That one actually happens to have a solid top, but you kind of get a sense of the effect. So that's one style of luminaire that we've been looking at. The other style, this one's a little bit better. You see the LEDs. This is there's no
polycarbonate. There's no globe, there's no visible component like that one, so it's very sort of open style. So the LEDs are still all up in the top, just as in that one. The difference here is that the LED, this is really a complete cutoff, and there's no prismatic effect, there's no light being reflected up, so all of this light is being thrown directly down towards the ground. And that's what you see in the image on the left in the slide. So what's interesting about it is it provides a very definitive, very sort of bright light here, and then that's all going down. The other one is more of sort of the illuminated globe. When you open these, the nice thing about it, just get a sense of what's happening. So inside, you can see these are the rows of LEDs. And so when we talk about putting more light out in certain situations, these panels on certain lights would be additional LEDs to put out a little bit more light, like at the intersections and so on. This would be potentially the side where a house might be, so back up against the building, it would be a cutoff here, so we're not throwing too much light, back towards. We want to light the sidewalks that are usually behind the lights, but we don't want to go too far with that light, so that's where the cutoffs would be. And then this has a polycarbonate lens. This one's actually a glass lens, but we would go polycarbonate to protect these from damage from things being thrown up from below. And so this is kind of what the inside of that looks like. This one's just a little bit easier to show you how it works and how it's laid out. So those are kind of some of the highlights, I guess, or the features of the luminaires that we're looking at.
And one more, warmth.
And then just to kind of talk about color range, I think you've seen a lot of maybe some of your neighbors too, neighboring communities have done LED projects over the last, say, 5 years, and a lot of these early projects tended to be very white, very bright light, and light's measured in degrees of Kelvin. When you look at kind of the temperature, it's a way of looking at and evaluating the quality of light you're getting out of the fixtures. So a lot of communities are in the 5,000 K range. We're recommending, and we're seeing more and more communities go down to 3,000, and that's a much more common. It's more of a sort of orange light. You can see candles all the way to the left. So in the 3,000 Kelvin range is what we've been running our photometrics at and what we've been looking at as far as the color and the type of light coming out of. And either one of these luminaires can produce that kind of color rendition.
Estimated project cost. We are pre-25, meaning we are still kind of between a conceptual and a 25% plan. But we've been able to kind of line item estimate based on MassDOT's average bid prices that we have good, reliable information from current bids as recent as 2 weeks, a month old, on jobs across the state, but also central to their District 3 region that Clinton is in. So we have found them to be good examples of pricing, and we've been using those to kind of make sure that the numbers are where the town has kind of pointed us to as far as a budget and costs. Larger numbers here over on the left-hand side of the table. You can see the top 3 numbers kind of dominate the job, the lighting, the sidewalks, the roadway. It's about 60%, maybe just a little bit more of the job. And some of the other costs, drainage, miscellaneous, engineering and construction admin, landscaping, and police make up the difference. The miscellaneous is not a contingency item. It's more of these smaller items that don't group themselves into a big enough line item without filling up the entire page with line items. This takes you to a total cost of $4.25 million. With what we typically try to recommend to communities is to have some contingency in place. Things tend to happen in construction jobs, if you applied even a 5% to this, it would take you up to 4.5, which is where I think you are proposing for year 1. This is our last slide, just a rendering of what we think High Street could look like at night. Again, doesn't dramatically change High Street, but going to make it a lot more accessible and walkable and safe for folks, invite what I said. So with that, we'd love to take any questions or comments that you have.
Well, I just wanted to point out to the board, and you can help me with this. The roadway will be completely reconstructed. In
Yeah,
other words,
sure.
what is the term that's used?
The term that we've been using is called full-depth reconstruction.
Full-depth
Yeah,
reconstruction.
so we would reconstruct the roadway structure, including the gravel, if it needs to be reconstructed. Many times the gravel is good, it might need to be recompacted, it's been impacted by a lot of utility trenching and different other work that's gone out there. We would build our way up into a pavement base and then intermediate course and a surface course. We think that the amount of money that you're gonna spend here, the cost difference to going from a resurfacing project where we would mill off only the top 1.5 inches or so, put back 1.5 inches, it's a better investment for you long-term to go down full depth and make that roadway firm and solid for another, 40, 50 years, with proper maintenance and appropriate resurfacings and stuff like that. The roadway base will last that long. If you don't do that, what you can end up with is a lot of cracking, reflective cracking that they call, that will come right up in the same areas where you have cracking now. That won't happen immediately, but it'll happen rather quickly. And if you have base failure in any of those areas, you will immediately go back into those same areas with base failure. So it's best to correct it with the dollar amount you're spending, because you don't want to go back in here and do major construction again after you spent all this other money.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, is there any evaluation of utilities going to the buildings on either side of High Street, water lines specifically, as to their condition and need
Yeah,
for
I
repair?
believe, Chris, you're pretty confident that you're...
Yeah, the water lines were actually replaced from Water Street to Church Street maybe 10 years ago. That's where you see that trench going down the road and the water services all the way across. The water line the rest of the way up is a 12-inch line, which our history with 12-inch lines is they don't corrode like some of the smaller lines, and they're in good shape. We will look at to see if there's any cast iron services that need to be replaced in that stretch. There are none in the other stretch, so we'll make sure that those are replaced before this project takes off. And the gas main is all brand new. Drainage is going to get upgraded. And the sewer line, generally what we would do is clean and line them. So we generally, they're clay lines, they're old lines and clay lines, and they're brick structures. Brick structures are generally throughout town very solid. And what you can do after the fact or before the fact is you could actually line the clay pipe and make it basically a plastic pipe from the inside instead of tearing up the road to do that, which is what we end up doing.
Thank you.
And once we have that solid geometry at that 25% level, we will take this set of plans and distribute it to every utility company that is in the town of Clinton, and they will tell us whether they're on High Street or Church Street, and they will also we'll talk to them about whether they need that upgraded service or change or something like that. But, based on, Chris's knowledge of the roadway, we're pretty good here. We don't have a lot of issues in front of us that we currently know about. Who knows, there could be someone out there that needs to do something and hasn't raised their hand.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I just had one on the lighting examples, where you're saying the warm white halogen, that one's preferred. If we wanted to change that, down, let's say we got them in there and light wasn't doing it, how hard is that to change to go to some other lighting example?
Yeah, I think it would be challenging to do that, because you'd be changing all the diodes.
Okay.
So
we really have to make up our mind.
it wouldn't be like a rheostat, right? It would be more, you'd be taking out components and replacing them.
Do we have any examples, I don't know if you have a tag, but like actually a light post like that with this type of light? What it would look like?
Yes, we've shown some, certainly the town manager and folks in planning and DPW have seen some other projects with lights of this color and this style that we open. And we could help you with that, we could direct you to those communities. If it's something you'd like to see as an example too, we might even be able to. Nelson Street. Yeah, Nelson Street's, I think, maybe a little bit whiter in terms of.
Yeah, I was gonna say Nelson Street's a lot brighter. I'm thinking that more like the cool white or blue sky.
I think it's probably a 4,000 or 4,500 in Nelson.
Okay.
So, but yeah, we can definitely direct you to some other projects and encourage you to go out and look.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's something that I don't know, the townspeople would like to get a feel for too, and something should like.
Yeah, it's a big decision. It's kind of, I mean, to put it at a real personal level, it's like buying light bulbs at, the hardware store, right? You're gonna buy soft white, or you're gonna buy, a white or a daylight, type bulb, and everyone has a preference and comfortable with that.
My main concern is that they're just gonna have, which I'm sure that the committee did a lot of work, my concern is that they're just shooting enough light to brightness,
Yeah,
you know?
no, understood, and what we ask people to do is, if you see examples, whether you hate them or whether you love them, if you can tell us where they are, we can measure that light, we can find out something about it, and then we can either avoid it or go towards that. But that really, that's the way I experience light, is, in the nighttime, in an area where I'm comfortable, and hey, this is a nice appropriate light. Well, what is this?
We would have the accessibility to increase the brightness or lower the brightness.
Yeah.
Right, Mike would have something like that.
Sure, so
Up to that level.
there are some options, right? So, in the 3,000K, there's about a 15% difference between the output of a 3,000K and a 4,000K. So, if you're going with the 3,000, which is sort of where we are on our design work, if you were to choose the 4,000, so you get more light out of that color, for instance, you get more light on the ground. These guys have ballasts and drivers inside of them, and the drivers have presets, and the presets can be adjusted to different levels. So for instance, at the intersection of High and Church, this might be running at 100% all the time, sort of maximum output. But you might choose in other locations further down the street, you might choose a spot where it runs at 80%, and it's maybe the light's a little more cooled, and there's not quite so much light coming out. So presets come from the factory, so from what we understand, it's not something you would be adjusting, regularly. So I think maybe once the project's up and running, you would maybe adjust it once or twice to kind of get them dialed in, and that would be where you're at. But you have the option, like I said, 5 or 6 options to preset different light levels coming out of the factory.
Gotcha.
Mr. Chair, if I may, how does the decorative output compare against an LED Cobra head streetlight? We are in the process right now, maybe a quarter or half of the town has been done with a 3,000K Cobra head streetlight. So how would that light compare to these for comparison if people wanted to go to those neighborhoods and check to see?
That's a great point. So, if it's 3,000K in your LED retrofits, is that right?
Right.
Yeah, so that would be a great example to go and see what that 3,000 on the street looks like. Yeah, it's going to be the same kind of color. The difference is that mounting height is so much higher. That light is quite high above your head, maybe 28 or 30 feet high. So what you're going to experience is a little more glare coming off of that light, in your eye. Where these poles are lower, they're ornamental, so there's going to be sort of less glare, less sort of harshness to the light on the ornamental pole. But in terms of color, those would be good streets to go and look at.
Yeah, because the new street lights seem to be like more the brighter, cool, the blue sky, and this has more of an amber color to it. That's why I was asking too.
Yeah, and it's also, the chart it's a graphic that's been printed or it's on the PowerPoint, so it's a little bit of interpretation. That's the general range, but I think the best thing would be, as Tom said, to go out in the field and really look at, other examples and look at something which is specified and install that 3,000K. You get a feel for it.
Thank you.
Could I just add one thing? If you want to go up to the Burden Hill area,
we just got new ones up there.
Have been done in they are a little bit wider than I think than what that picture is, but that's what color these would be. They're 3,000K.
Okay.
These are 3,000K that we're proposing, and the light is certainly it's a little bit more on the white side than I think than what that graphic showed. It's not the blue lights that people are afraid of with LEDs. That's what we're trying to stay away from.
No, the new street lights that they got are, like you said, they're whiter light.
Yeah,
They're nice because they do throw a lot of light and they're brighter. I think they look great.
That's what these are proposed right now to be. Yep, same color.
Okay.
And the new streetlights have controllers on them, so those can be adjusted up to that maximum
3,000,
level.
yeah.
So.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. I've sort of lost my place here. What article is this, Michael?
Oh, that is,
I had it, and then I turned my page.
right,
17. It's 17.
right.
So, maybe we'll just talk about Article 17. What's the wish of the board with regard to Article 17?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that the board include Article 17 on the warrant.
I'll second.
Motion's made and seconded to include Article 17 on the warrant. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I just want to thank the Beta Group. I took over Mr. Sargent's spot on the Downtown Steering Committee, so I've only been to a couple of these meetings, but they've been completely responsive, listening and cooperating with everything the committee's asked. The committee itself is a tremendous group of town employees and business owners, and I want to thank you, Mr. Chair. You've been shepherding this project since before I was on this board, so I hope that people understand the transformative potential we have here. I believe Clinton has a lot to offer, but first and foremost, it starts on High Street, and bringing that downtown business district up to where it should be is going to open a ton of doors for us. So I want to thank you personally for taking this to the goal line, because I know you've worked hard on this for a lot of years, and I'm looking forward to voting this at town meeting.
Any other discussion?
Just under discussion, Mr. Chairman, as part of the Budget Subcommittee review process, the Finance Committee is recommending that this warrant article be funded $3 million from the Capital Improvement Fund and 1.5, somebody jump in if I'm mischaracterizing it, as a general appropriation subject to being mitigated by the potential grants that are available.
Okay. Any other discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed, motion's carried. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your work on this
Thanks, guys.
project.
Thank
and
you.
your presentation tonight. In a related matter, Article 16 is related to this, and it's the temporary easements for the purpose of repairing, improving, or reconstructing High Street and/or the sidewalks, drainage facility, and appurtenances related. So basically, it's the takings and all that has to do with Article 17. So maybe we could vote on that, but I also think that Article 17 should be first, because that's the major article.
Yeah, that's true.
So we
Because
should
if that
say
doesn't
Article
pass,
7.
We don't need the easements.
Huh?
Well, can we pass it
If that
without
doesn't
the
pass,
easements?
we don't need the easements, right?
Can we do it
That's
without
true.
the easements?
I think it'd be very difficult.
Well, do we need the easements first then? I don't know, is this like logistics?
Oh, no.
No.
Oh, no, we can pass Article 17 if it
just
was
can't do it
16.
without the easement.
Yeah, yes.
They just need to be swapped.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They just need to be swapped, because people say, well, what do you need easements for? And then you get
We're
into
getting there.
discussion of the actual article.
That's a good point.
So I don't know, do we want to take up Article 16?
Mr. Chairman, I move we accept Article 16 as written.
I'll second.
Motion's made to accept Article 16 as written. Is there any discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed, motion's carried, and we'll reverse that,
That's a good point.
okay.
Good point.
We also have here this evening the Director of Public Works, as he has the number of warrant articles on the, he has the number of articles on the warrant, and they are,
Looks like 23, 22, starts at 21, I think.
to start at Article 21.
Looks like 21.
No, there's some earlier, there's the landfill articles, they would start at 11,
11.
Oh, 11, okay.
Stand corrected
11, 12, and then it would jump ahead.
to 21.
I don't have a copy of them, so if you could just refresh me on which one.
Okay, Article 11 is to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate or transfer from the landfill enterprise fund retained earnings the sum of $2,560,000 or any other sum to the landfill closure reserve.
Yeah, what this is we're required, the main purpose of why we're doing this project is to cap the landfill and to dredge the contaminated soils in South Meadow Pond. And this money would be transferred to be spent to do that work, to cap the landfill and to dredge the pond. A couple of years ago, I think we did about 3.8 million. We transferred, I don't know the exact number, but it was around $3.8 million. This will be another 2.5, and then there's going to be another 2.5 total in the next coming fiscal year or two. And that will fully fund all the work that we have to do to put a state-of-the-art cap and to clean the pond, which was the driving force on why we had to do this project in the first place. So it's basically setting the money aside so that we know that we have enough money to complete all the work that has to be done.
Which is what DEP requires us to do. Right?
It's a requirement, yeah. It's a requirement of the DEP to have it's called a financial assurance mechanism. Like if we were a private company, we would have to put all that money up front. They allow us to do it over the course of the project, which is a 7-year project. So each year for 7 years, you've put aside a certain amount of money to assure that you have the money to finish the project. Basically, if you're a private landfill and they came in and said you have to close the landfill tomorrow, they have to have enough money to cap the landfill and to monitor it over the course of about 30 years. So this is our financial assurance mechanism, so the DEP is comfortable that we're going to do what we promised we would do.
Okay, any questions from members of the board on Article 12? Being none, what is the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chair, make a motion that we accept Article 11.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded to accept Article 11 onto the warrant. Is there any discussion? There being none, all in favor?
Aye.
And
Aye.
opposed? Motion's carried. Article 12, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate or transfer from the landfill enterprise fund retained earnings the sum of, and this is a placeholder. We don't have a figure yet, Michael?
No, that's something we need to decide on, looking at what is going to be used of those surplus funds right now for the current year, like 2.5, that 2.5 million would be coming from that number?
Yes.
And just to see if there's...
No.
The 2.56 would be coming from retained earnings, not from the infrastructure fund. Are you talking about
Right.
the previous article we talked about?
No, the next article is
Oh.
to take from retained earnings to the infrastructure account. So based on what your retained earnings are, minus what your need this year, how much will be transferred to the
Yeah,
infrastructure?
I just thought you said that 2.56 from the previous article was being taken from that. That's being taken from retained earnings, not from the
Right.
infrastructure fund.
Right.
But this next article,
Right.
we're also taking from retained.
Taking-
earnings,
The
putting it-
balance of the retained earnings.
balance of retained
So
earnings,
how
right.
much would that balance be that you don't need
Yeah.
for the landfill operations? So
Right.
that's something that I think, Mr. McGowan would give us some direction on.
And so this is an article that is transferring some money from the landfill enterprise fund to the capital projects and infrastructure fund
Correct.
for capital improvements and infrastructure. And that number has yet to be determined.
Yes.
Any rough idea?
Well, from last fiscal year, when we closed out the fiscal year, there was a surplus in the enterprise fund, retained earnings, or free cash, whatever you want to call it, of almost exactly $9 million. So you take the 2.5 million out of that, so you're at about $6.5 million. That's surplus that could be put into that fund, and I'm not recommending that we do that because we should be, prudent with this money.
Yeah.
So currently, we have done this in past years. We have currently taken out $3.5 million out of that fund and put it into the infrastructure stabilization, which is what the balance is right now. So if we take whatever we're gonna use that money for this year, we need to cover that with this amount of money that'll be transferred out of this fund, minus the 3.5. So if I think the High Street project, you're talking about $3 million right now. That leaves a balance of $500,000. So whatever all the other articles add up to, we need to at least cover that amount of money to be able to spend that money on those articles.
Okay.
So if we're gonna spend another $2 million on different articles that we wanted to come out of that infrastructure stabilization, we got to put at least 1.5 million more dollars in, and that's where this number could come from.
Okay,
And there's enough available, because we're not anywhere near those figures for what we're proposing for articles in here. So, you know, we should be conservative with the landfill money for sure.
So maybe, Mr. Chair, just going through some of the other articles that will be funded from the capital fund, and then we can backtrack into.
oh, no, I don't think, I just wanted a
Yeah,
rough
yeah,
idea
yeah.
of what it was going to be like.
Right.
So, I mean, it might be in the neighborhood of $3.5 million.
It could be, yeah, 2 million, 3 million.
Or it could be 2 million.
anywhere in there, yeah, depending on what all the other articles
And it's
have.
somewhat
We'll talk
dependent on what the other articles, which we don't have to add up tonight. And this is all money that's excess from closing the landfill.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I think it's important that, even talking about the previous article, for people to know that, you know, the High Street project, the funding source for that High Street project is gonna be from the stabilization fund, which is not taxpayer money. We're not gonna raise taxes, we're not gonna, you know, lower services. This is just money that we, you know, the town of Clinton was lucky enough to have this, well, really not lucky. We're lucky enough to have a landfill that we had to kind of redo, but there is a little bit of surplus money, because the economy is really well, and the landfill soils industry is there's not a whole lot of options for people out there. So the fund has done well, and this is luckily gives us an opportunity to make some improvements without adding taxes to anybody's.
Okay.
But the bottom line is the landfill still has to be capped and make sure there's
Right.
enough to do.
yeah.
Which is again why I said
Yeah.
we got to be conservative with it,
Yep.
without
Right.
question.
Absolutely.
So what's the pleasure of the board with regard to Article 12?
Motion to include Article 12 with the amount to be adjudicated later,
Finalized
but
at the end of the night, yeah.
I'll second.
Motion's made and seconded to accept Article 12 onto the warrant. Is there any discussion? Being none, all in favor
Aye.
and opposed? Motion's carried. So next, Michael, we're going to where?
Article 21. I think.
21?
Oh, sorry, I missed one.
Yeah, the next would be, to 21, right? You're right. Yep.
To see if the town will vote, this is Article 21, to see if the town will vote to raise an appropriate borrow transfer from the stabilization fund or transfer from available funds the sum of $140,000 to be expended by the Department of Public Works for the purchase of a new one-ton truck with catch basin cleaner. So that seems pretty clear.
Yeah, it's pretty clear. Our catch basin truck, which we're still going to use, it's very old. I don't even know what year it is. My guess is it's somewhere around 1985 or 90 or in that range, and it's old and tired, and it still works, and we're still going to use it. But with the new stormwater regulations that are out that we've talked about in the past, we you know, our requirements for cleaning catch basins is you know, it's under a lot more scrutiny. And this new one-ton truck will be very versatile, easy to maneuver. Instead of having a bigger truck, it's be real easy to get around and get into all these catch basins. So it's not cheap, but it's a nice versatile truck, and we could use it for other things besides that as well, because it's a regular one-ton dump truck, but it'll have a catch basin attachment on it. So, catch basin cleaner attachment.
Right. So what's the pleasure of the board with regard to Article 21?
Chair, make a motion that we accept Article 21, the warrant.
second.
Motion's made and seconded to accept Article 21. Is there any discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? And now we are at 22, yes. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate or borrow or transfer from the Capital Projects and Infrastructure Improvement Stabilization Fund the sum of X dollars to be expended by the Department of Public Works for road resurfacing improvements as approved by the, so that's a number to be determined later, and it's for some road
Road
improvements?
Yeah, roadway improvements. Right now, we're designing a couple of projects, Berlin Street and Greeley Street. They're both streets that I feel deserve some improvements over what is there right now, including curbing and sidewalks, at least for some extent of each of those roads. In order to do that, whenever you add curbing and sidewalks, you basically triple the cost of doing a road construction project. Typical road maybe cost $80 to $90 a foot. If you're just gonna pulverize it and repave it, it's about $80 a foot. And if you get into this detail of curbing and sidewalks, if they're concrete sidewalks, granite curbing, you're up in the $250 a foot range. So a project like Berlin Street, which I recommend we do this year,
Yep.
is, I'm not recommending that we go the entire length with curbing and sidewalk. We can determine that, it's under design. We're looking at different options about how far we extend it, both sides of the road, one side of the road. If we stop the concrete sidewalk at a certain point and maybe go to asphalt when you get further out of town, but those options we'll kind of look at later. But the project would range between $900,000 and $1.2 million, depending on what we do, for finishes. Greeley Street, I would say I would put that on hold. We have to do some drainage work and some water work, so I would say we get that work done first and then go back to that one next year. But I also think we should think about, we're gonna have about $330,000. Right now, our Chapter 90 fund is pretty much completely depleted. And this year, we'll be assuming we're getting about $330,000 like we always do, which is what the proposal is right now from the state. So we need slightly over $1 million maybe to do Berlin Street. We got $300,000 from Chapter 90. And I would recommend that we do maybe some pulverizing and paving of some of the side streets that are relatively speaking inexpensive to do, but just to show that we're moving forward. We're not just concentrating on all the main roads either, like High Street's getting done, it's a main road, Berlin Street's a main road, Water Street. Some of the side roads are in desperate need of attention, and those are more in the $80 a foot range. So, if we did a certain dollar amount of that plus Berlin Street, I think that'd be a good goal or a good aim for what I would like to do this year. Of course, it's up to the board, but so
how much are you recommending, Chris?
I would like to spend total of about $1.5 million. So if we do about 1.2 in the article, and $300,000 will come from Chapter 90. That'd give us some flexibility to do some of the side roads and to get. I'm really nervous about not doing Berlin Street as soon as possible. I think right now what we're projecting is we're going to do a mill and overlay for 80% of the project, and about 20% of it will need to be full depth. I mean, Michael, you live up there. You can see the road starting to deteriorate at a much quicker rate every year. And I think if this thing winters again, those percentages are gonna change drastically, and we're gonna end up into a full depth reconstruction project on Berlin Street, which I don't feel is necessary, because I think if we can get to it this year, and I'm hoping, this stuff still has to go to the state for some of the approvals on some of these articles. If we can get to it this fall, then we're gonna beat this winter. It seems like every winter Berlin Street is getting a lot worse, very, very quickly, and it's something that I think we should strive to do this year.
So the $300,000, we wouldn't count that in with so if we did 1.5 million, and then it would be another 300, so it'd be a total of 1.8.
Well, either way, you do 1.8, or you could do 1.5 here, or 1.2 here, and then another 300,000 would be a total spending on roadways of 1.5
But you only need
or you could do that way, and obviously you'd get $300,000 more worth of
Yeah,
side
absolutely.
streets done.
I'd be obviously in favor of the higher amount. We got to get these streets done. I think they need to get done.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Just a point of discussion. The Finance Committee, we did not have the background on this request to present to the Finance Committee. They seemed inclined to not go over $500,000, but again, none of us had the knowledge base to go into that or to back up the higher amount. I personally would support the 1.5 million and explain to the Finance Committee the reason for doing that.
500,000 is not going to get us much.
And this is coming out of the capital improvement fund.
Right. So it's, again, not taxpayer
It's not
money.
costing the taxpayers anything here.
Okay. Are we ready to
Yeah.
So what's the pleasure of the board with regard to Article 22?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion, we accept Article 22 in the sum of $1.5 million for road resurfacing and improvements.
And just, again, under discussion, I want to clarify that the presentation Chris gave us, we didn't have the benefit of and weren't able to present to the Finance Committee. So I just want them to be aware of why we're supporting this.
Right, do we have a second on the motion?
Second.
Motion's made and seconded for Article 22 at $1.5 million. Do we have any discussion?
Just real quick, Mr. Chair, I just want to point out what we talked about. I mean, Berlin Street definitely needs it. It's a gateway into town. Traveling that road, it's a very busy road, obviously. It's definitely needs road resurfacing. Chris mentioned Gurley Street, another busy road, which we have obviously Clinton Hospital on. And then, you talked about some other streets, side streets. I know like Plain Street, South Main Street. Those side streets are in tough shape, and I'm sure there's some other ones out there that could be done as well. So I think it's a great idea. Hopefully, we can come back next year and do some more on this. But I just wanted to make that point that these roads definitely need it, and I think that we're going in the right direction. We're getting these roads done. So that's what I had to say. Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Just a point of clarification. Chris, we're talking about 1.5 with the Chapter 90, so is this
I think
1.2?
1.5 on this article plus the chapter
Plus.
90.
So it'll be
That's
1.8.
1.8 altogether.
Any other discussion? There being none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So Article 22 is accepted at $1.5 million. Article 23, raise and appropriate or transfer from the Capital Projects and Infrastructure Improvement Stabilization Fund, sum of $200,000 to be expended by the Department of Public Works for drainage system improvements on Pleasant Street, Marshall Street, Liberty Street, Summit Street, and Wilson Street. Chris?
Yeah, these are chronic drainage issues, especially in the wintertime. Wilson Street, Summit Street, where you see water just pouring down the side of the road, and this year was particularly bad, and there were more streets you probably had issues with this year just because the groundwater was so high. But these ones have been chronic for years that we have issues, and I would like to tackle some of those issues this year. The Pleasant Street is more of an issue with some of the flooding that has happened down at the Nipro facility, and some of the water that is causing them the problems is coming from this Pleasant Street area where the drains aren't taking the water the way they should be taking the water. And I want to do some corrections to that to at least make it better for them. It's not going to solve their problem. There are other issues that have to be taken care of, but this is a major one that needs to be done. And then the Marshall Street, there's a culvert that comes through from, it's basically Rigby Brook that comes underground across Brook Street and under Marshall Street, opens up at the end. There's a little culvert behind that 9 Marshall Street that burned down, that building there behind the Gulf Station. Mm-hmm. And that culvert needs to be cleaned out. It's a box culvert, and it's probably got, it's probably a 4-foot high culvert with 2 foot of muck in it. So we want to clean that culvert out. The problem with this culvert being blocked is drainage in that area kind of goes in 2 directions. Some of it goes down Brook Street, and some of it goes across, and it almost can go in either direction the way the system was built. And right now it's all going down Brook Street, and we have problems with the manhole cover actually popping up because of the amount of water that's going down to Brook Street. So if we clean this culvert out, it'll divert back to where it belongs, over half and half down the Marshall Street and Brook Street, and kind of resolve a problem we have down there. Just ongoing issues that we haven't been able to tackle, so.
So this is again from the Capital Projects and Infrastructure Stabilization Fund. Are there any questions from the members of the board? Being none, what's the pleasure of the board with regards to Article 23?
Motion to include Article 23, Mr. Chairman?
I'll second.
Motion's made and seconded to include Article 23. Is there any discussion? There being none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And opposed, motion's carried.
Someone keeping a tab here.
Article 24, that's $1 million by the Department of Public Works for the South Meadow Pond dredging and Phase 1 landfill closure project. And this is coming from the landfill closure reserve. And so So go ahead.
Yeah,
Chris.
so what this money is the money we talked about earlier, that $2.5 million that we have to set aside to complete the cap. Our first phase of our cap, a year ago, we appropriated $1.5 million. With that money, we did rubbish relocation, we rebuilt a swale and an access road that had to go in along the railroad tracks. We've only spent about half of that money. This is gonna supplement that money to be able to do two things. One is cap about 40% of the landfill, which we're anticipating doing, at least starting before the end of this fiscal year, and then continuing on the permitting and design for the pond dredge. We're hoping to be able to start the pond dredge a year from this summer. We're still knee-deep in permitting, and it's a very difficult job to permit, but we're making progress, but we have a little ways to go. So it's basically taking money out of that reserve fund, which is what that money is there for. And again, this is not taxpayer money, it's funded by the tipping fees that we're getting for the landfill.
And Cliff, just for clarification for the board, this 1 million, that's not in addition to the 2.5 of Article 11, that's part of the 2.
It's part of the 2.5, so it's taking money out of that 2.5, but there's already more money than that in that fund, but it's this, so the first article supplements the money that we already have in there, and this takes money out of that reserve fund.
Okay, yeah.
So we're allowed to
So it's
spend.
not an additional million, it's something that the accountant requires to do, because I question it, saying, geez, it looks like we're taking another million, but really not. It's that million is part of the 2.5, or part of the 2.5 plus what's in there, so it's not an additional million.
Generally, you wouldn't do it this way, but where it's an enterprise fund with stuff tagged on that has to be done at a later date, they wanted a reserve fund set up to kind of set that money aside to do this type of work. So again, like Bob said, it's I agree with you. I wouldn't have done it that way personally, but
It's a little
that's how they
confusing,
wanted to
though.
do it. Yeah.
It's not.
So this isn't another million?
No.
Yeah.
So that 2.5.
It's part of that 2.5. Yep.
So are there any questions from members of the board? Being none, being none, what's the pleasure of the board with
Motion
regard
to
to?
include Article 24. Second.
Motion's made and seconded to include Article 24. Are there any discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And motion's opposed, motion's carried. Article 25 is $200,000 to replace the water meter replacement project. And to be used for inflow and infiltration study. Chris?
Yes. I'll kind of talk about 25 and 26 together because they're related. So first on Article 25, several years ago we borrowed $1 million to replace water meters throughout town. So we hired a contractor and replaced all the old water meters in town. And there is $200,000 left over from that borrowing article. The money's already borrowed, so it's already sitting there. And we want to transfer that money so it doesn't have to be used for water meters, but it can now be used for sewer inflow and infiltration study. The next article down is a $460,000 borrowing article, and that is to complete the remainder of the infiltration study. And the first one, we're going to do some sewer improvements, but the majority of that money will be for I&I study. So what this I&I study is, the EPA came out with new regulations where they're no longer letting towns wait for developers to come in to find and fix your infiltration, which we've done for years, is how we have done it. Now they're requiring us to go out, study the entire system. Not the entire system, systems where you have older pipes. So we don't really have to do Nathan Heights or areas like that where it's all brand new plastic pipe. But unfortunately for us, probably 80% of our town falls under the older category. So what we're doing right now, we're doing the first phase of it, and we're down in the north end, which after we did this kind of a generalized study of our whole system, the north end was leaking the most, which is not surprising because it's the lower elevations in town, so the groundwater is closer to the ground, more infiltration. So we're studying that section right now, which includes metering, cammering, inspecting manholes. So we hire a subcontractor to come in and do that type of work. This will do the other 60% or so of the town that we are required to do. So we're gonna be borrowing money to really fine tune where our problems are, and that'll give us the tools to prioritize how we're gonna go forward fixing them in the future. And whether they come from a developer or the Water and Sewer Enterprise Fund, you know, we're gonna have to start doing, you know, they're not talking about doing repairs over the next 5 years. We'll probably give them a 20-year plan to reduce our I&I, but we have to know where it is first, and that's what this money is for. And it's mandated by the EPA that we do this, so you know, we're gonna borrow the money to do it, so.
Okay.
So that's what these two articles are. One is to transfer money from a previous article that's already been borrowed and is sitting there, and the other is to supplement that to complete the project.
And Mr. Chair, just a quick question. Just listening to explain it, the wording in the first is for study and/or improvements. The second one's only study.
Right.
Do you want
Yeah.
both? Or?
Yeah, why don't you, I think we should do both that way. That way, if the I&I study costs a little bit less money, we won't have to come back here and transfer. We can use that to kind of fix some of the, you know, we can go after some of the really obvious and glaring, and there's gonna be some easy fixes on this I&I. There's gonna be some very difficult fixes, but we can go after the low-hanging fruit and get ahead of the game and fix some of the sewer issues and the major infiltration problems we have if there's money left over, so. And one more thing on Article 25, that number, we have to confirm with the town accountant exactly how much money is left. Michael, if you make a note, maybe.
I already have that on there.
Yeah.
I have it bold on the board's warrant, because that needs to be checked. The accountant was on vacation, so she's back
Yeah, we can check
tomorrow. So I can
It's in that range, so that exact number will be determined tomorrow.
Any questions from the board on Articles 25 and 26, which are related? There being none, what's the pleasure of the board with regard to Article 25?
Mr. Please.
Motion to include Article 25 and 26.
Second.
Motion made to include Article 25 and 26. Is there any discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Motion's carried. Article 27 is $950,000 or any other sum to be expended by the Department of Public Works for exterior painting and installation of a disinfection byproduct removal system at the Burdett Hill water tank, and for the interior, exterior painting and installation of mixing valve system at the Millbury water tank. Chris?
So, every 5 years, we're required to do inspections inside and out of our water tanks. And every 2 years, we have what's called a sanitary survey, where the DEP comes in and goes through our entire water system, you know, basically looks at everything we do, how we do it, our financial situation, and gives us recommendations. Some they give us orders on, you have to do this, this, and this by a certain date, and others are recommendations. So combining these two things that we have done, the tank inspection and the DEP inspection, what we came up with was the Mulberry Drive tank. It's a steel tank, and it needs to be recoated inside and out. The inside's in probably better shape than the exterior. If you looked at the exterior of the tank, there's a lot of surface rust, and it's time to rehab that tank again. I believe the last time it was painted, I remember I lived in that neighborhood. We had basically, it was before my time on the board, but there was a catastrophic failure of the interior coating in that whole tank. It had to be taken offline, actually, for quite some time. And we want to absolutely get at it before that happens, because the water quality in that whole area was terrible when that happened. And what we also want to do, besides painting it, is we want to put in a mixing valve. So right now, the way that tank works is a pipe comes in and just comes into the bottom of the tank. Water goes in, water comes out. What ends up happening is the water at the top of the tank stagnates because it's not mixing thoroughly inside the tank. There's some mixing because it's pushing up pretty good on the, into the bottom of the tank. But what needs to happen is what you generally do is you go up the side of the tank with a pipe. It'll have diffusers, a third, and up by the top, and it'll spray water or force water out from the pump in different directions, so it'll mix that water in the tank and keeps the water fresh. And it helps us with, keeping on top of disinfection byproducts and different requirements that we have, chlorine residuals, bacteria, it makes it much more efficient to be able to control all of the problems that are inherent with the water system. So that's up at the Mulberry tank. The Burnett Hill tank is the older concrete tank. The exterior surface is starting to get quite deteriorated and needs to be repainted. The interior is just concrete, so there's no painting on the inside of those tanks, so it's to recoat the exterior of the tank. The other issue is that we would like to tackle with this money is we have disinfection byproducts are basically when you add chlorine to a surface water. The surface water has organics in it, and when you add chlorine to organics, you create, or the chemical reaction basically causes these, they're called disinfection byproducts. So without boring you with all the details, they're like trihalomethanes and haloacidic acids is what we test for. Those numbers have been creeping up. We're still in compliance with all EPA and DEP regulations, but the numbers have been creeping up. And it's a function of basically what the water quality is in the Wachusett Reservoir and how much chlorine we're adding to the system. Depending on the temperature of the water, the time of year, we have to add different amounts to keep a chlorine residual throughout the system. So they have these systems that you can put in the tanks that actually spray, it pulls water up from the bottom of the tank and sprays it out the top. And when this spraying happens, it actually emits the disinfection byproducts. It kind of casts it out in the air. They'll vent and it'll go out through the top of the tank. And instead of being in the water, it dissipates out through the vents in the top of the tank. So we want to put some of these systems in on those. The Burnett Hill tanks is where you want it, because you want to catch it very early in your system, and that's basically the earliest part of our system. So you do it up there, and then there's no need to do that at Mulberry, because by that time, by the time we treat it at Burnett Hill, we won't need to at Mulberry. It's a big ticket item, and it's necessary, and we do, and I've talked about this a few times in the past, but we do have a tremendous amount of debt coming off our books on the water and sewer enterprise fund over the next year or two. And, so this won't affect rates at all. We'll be able to still cover this under the existing rate structure. So that's what we're looking for.
Okay. Any questions? Being none, what's the wish of the board with regard to Article 27?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we accept Article 29 to the warrant.
27.
27? I thought it was 29.
Second.
Motion's made and second to accept Article 27. Is there any discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
The motion's carried. Article 28. This is another Public Works,
Our last.
it's $50,000 or any other sum to be expended by the Department of Public Works for studies, permitting in connection with dam removal assessments at the Weeki-Peeki Reservation.
So we have 4 major dams at the Weeki-Peeki. The Hayward Reservoir Dam is by far the biggest impoundment. It's a very large, not a very large reservoir. If you're comparing it to, the Wachusett Reservoir, it's a tiny little reservoir, but compared to the other ones up there, it's very big. So the money that I'm looking for is not to look at that dam, but to some of the other dams. We have the Fitch Basin Dam, the Lower Lindy, and the Upper Lindy. They're all very small impoundments, 5-acre areas of pond, 5 to 10 acres in that range, with not a lot of water in them, and not viable for the town to use as a surface water supply. So every year to 2 years, depending on the dam or the size of the dam, we have to do dam safety analysis, and we have to inspect the dams, and it's costly. It's probably costing us on $10,000 to $20,000 a year, depending on the year, to comply with the Department of Dam Safety for inspection purposes, not repairs or to try to get these. The dams are all in poor condition, so they have a rating system. They're all in poor condition, and the only money we're spending right now, we're keeping them in poor condition, but we're complying with the inspection requirements. So this $50,000 would be used to basically analyze the dams to see what it would take to remove these dams, if we so choose. But at least we know what we're up against. What do we need for permitting? What's it gonna take construction-wise? How much is it gonna cost? Like I said, they're very small dams. They're tiny little impoundments. And I think it's time we need to decide whether we're gonna take them down or repair them, but we need to do one or the other to get them out of the poor category. And this is just basically a start to get going on that, to try to figure out what we wanna do and what should be done with those dams.
Okay. Any questions for members of the board with regard to Article 28? There being none, what's the wishes of the board with regard to that article?
Motion to include Article 28, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded to include Article 28 in the town warrant. Or any discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? Motion's carried. There any other? There seems to be one back here. Article 35, transfer from landfill. Is that something that Chris would have to talk about?
No,
or-
that's something up for the board.
Okay. Well, I guess you're done, Chris.
Well, about those easement articles,
Oh, yeah.
Oh, where are
I
they?
don't know where those are. The easement and the taking. Near the end.
Easement.
yes.
I don't know.
So one's Article 51, which is the.
Yeah, and then there's Article 52, which is the South
Yeah,
Meadow
so
Road.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, 51,
51 and 52.
So 51 versus the Pondview Drive.
Okay, that, Article 51 is to see if the town will vote to accept by donation a parcel of land on Pondview Drive for the maintenance of the water line, said parcel being known as as Parcel A, consisting of 11,755 square feet, as shown on a plan of land entitled Land in Clinton, Massachusetts, Boston and Maine Corporation to South Meadow Way Realty Trust dated May 1st, 2014. So, okay, Chris, this is the
So-
taking for,
Trying to keep it brief because there's a long history. Pondview Drive, it's a private road, and it is served by public water or a public water line. It's a private line on a public road, I guess is what you would call it. But the actual roadway layout or right-of-way layout is not where the actual paved road is. So, which is kind of confusing. So what ends up happening is the right-of-way is kind of over here, and the road is more like half and half. So it's half on the right-of-way and half on this private strip of land. So a person who was developing, the past couple of years, 12 lots were approved up there on existing frontage. And the people who own the land bought this strip of land off the railroad. So the railroad owned the land. What happens is part of the road is on the land, and more importantly, the water main underneath it is actually on this private property. So the owner of that strip of land, which it's now useless to him, he bought it just in case he needed to kind of do improvements to the road, but then he ended up doing an A&R plan, so he didn't actually need it. He bought the land off the railroad, and we know how expensive that is, but he's willing to, he wants to donate that to the town. So one, the water line is not on private property that's actually not even on the right-of-way, which gets a little bit hairy if we end up with the water break in that area. There's no association up there, so it would, if there was a water break on that property, you know, the question will come up of who's fixing it, when's it, but once you have a break like that, you're gonna have, 20 houses out of water, and we're gonna have water everywhere, but now it's who's owns the land, and do we have to track these people down? And so he would like to donate it to the town, and I thought it made sense that we take that because the water line is under it. Basically what ended up happening is years ago, they put a water line in, the road, the traveled dirt road was here, so they went down the edge of the traveled dirt road. Well, it ended up that part of that traveled dirt road was on railroad property. The railroad never said anything, didn't care. He ended up buying the strip of land, so now the water line and a piece of the road is on that. So it made sense to us. He's donating it to the town. He's not looking for any money for it. He just thought it would be better if the town owned it than him. And I agree, just because there is a water line on there, and we need to have better control over that.
Okay. Any questions from the board on Article 51? Being none, what's the pleasure of the board with regard to Article 51?
Move we include Article 51 on the warrant.
Second.
Motion's, is there a second?
Second.
Motion's made and seconded to include Article 51. Is there any discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? Motion's carried. Article 52 is to see if the town will vote to grant a utility easement over town-owned land on South Meadow Road for access to a solar array on private property. Chris?
So, behind the landfill, the town owns a piece of property back there. We bought that at the beginning of the landfill project, but there's also several parcels of privately owned land out there. One of the owners of the land in the back has approached the town about possibly using our access road for a utility easement to be able to get solar in the back. So what this article is for is to allow the town to give some landowner, doesn't necessarily have to be this landowner, the ability to use that access road for an easement to run solar into the back of their property. What would probably end up happening is we'd go out to bid, and we would set parameters on what the town would want in return for that easement, and then we'd go out to bid, and whatever property owner back there gave us the best proposal would end up getting the easement. One benefit to the town would be that the land in the back that we bought does not have power. And this is a very long stretch of road. It's probably 2,500 feet, I'm guessing, of road. So they would put an underground duct bank out to their property line. And when they're doing that, we could make them put, a couple of conduits in their duct bank that we could actually utilize to get power out to our back land. So if we ever wanted to do anything back there, put up a small building, a maintenance shack or something, we would have the ability to get power out there. The other part of this would be that the town is required, and I believe we want to, put solar on the landfill. So we're gonna have on the top of our landfill about 9 acres of usable space to put solar. We have a requirement in our permit that we put solar on the landfill. So this process of them going through the process of getting solar approved in the back would benefit the town, because we could piggyback onto what they're doing and get our smaller facility, they're not necessarily going to be paying for the permitting, but all of the preliminary work that you need in order to get a permit to do this from National Grid, the study basically that says, okay, this is what needs to happen for upgrades. So if they're limited in the backland to 5 megawatts is what they're the most they can put in, and we have a couple of megawatts, one of our requirements could be that in their study, they study the system based on 7 megawatts, not 5 megawatts, so any improvements that have to be done in the town of Clinton in order to get this solar in, we wouldn't have to do it. The other developer, the other property would be doing it. This is not binding us to give anybody an easement. It just allows them to move forward with the next phase of investigation to see what needs to be done for solar. Questions have come up about is there enough capacity in the town of Clinton to support both their system and our system? And the answer is yes. There's 10 megawatts of capacity in Clinton with minimal upgrades needed, and the most that would go in up there is 7. So it would put a dent in it, but it's nowhere near what this is. 9 acres is between 1 and 2 megawatts. So, all the municipal buildings combined, if you put solar on every roof, wouldn't come up to 1 megawatt of power. So there's still plenty of capacity in the town for future solar projects, and this would get the ball rolling to allow some solar. It's basically dead land back there. There's really no way to access it commercially. You can access it, but not commercially, because you'd have to go over railroad tracks, which the railroad won't let them do on one side, and they're kind of landlocked on the Clinton side with this access road between the landfills. And it would, if they did put solar, it would greatly increase the value of their property, and the town would benefit from the, you know, the additional tax revenue from that. So that's what this one's about.
All right. Any questions? Being
Mr.
not,
Chairman,
no,
we'll
yeah.
probably have to add some of the language, we'll probably beef that article up a little bit, just add some of the language that Chris just articulated to the board.
All right. So any motion would say that Article 52 as amended by town council. Any questions? Being none, what's the pleasure of the board with regards to Article 52?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded to approve Article 52 pending additions from town council. Is there any discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion's carried.
I think I'm done.
You're all done? Okay, and we
Thanks,
have
Christopher.
Mr. Duffy here. Mr. Duffy, how many articles are you? Because I'm thinking of taking a 5-minute recess. We've been at it for almost 2 hours. Okay, does anyone
Mr.
object
Duffy was
to
gonna
us?
speak.
Mr.
I
Five-
Not come back.
I can do it. All right, 5-minute recess?
Sure. Yeah, Mr. Duffy was gonna speak to the zoning articles, so it might take a few minutes.
It may take a few minutes, that's what I thought. Okay.
I'm not gonna miss this.
I don't ever remember it being discussed.
Too long, getting longer and longer. What-
can you tell us what articles you're going to be?
I'm actually not familiar with the numbers. I'm here to speak on behalf of the planning board to address any questions that your board may have concerning the proposed amendments to the zoning bylaw, and also to discuss an article, if you wish, I can also discuss the article that requests the town declare 172 Sterling Street and 329 High Street as surplus properties.
All right, well, we have Article 40, which is to see if the town will vote to amend the zoning bylaw by inserting a new section 3500, mixed-use downtown residential.
Sure.
So that's one of yours.
Okay. And then, if that's 40, then 40, 41, 42, and 43 should be zoning.
Stretch code, is that yours?
Stretch code is not in zoning, that's an admin bylaw. I can speak to that as well.
45 is the surplus land one, so.
Okay, so we're
40
going,
40 through 43, and then 44 we're going to eliminate, and then 45.
okay, so, Article 40, to see if the town will vote to amend the zoning bylaws by inserting a new section 3500, mixed-use downtown residential.
Take it
There
away.
you go.
You may recall at last year's town meeting, the voters approved a one-year moratorium on the construction, on the permitting of multifamily houses in Clinton. This article was proposed by the planning board out of concerns that were arising relative to an influx of multifamily proposals that were largely located in the R2 district in town, the less populated, less densely populated part of town, which is established under the purposes of zoning for low-density residential use. The town, town meeting also provided the planning board $15,000 to hire a consultant to do an analysis of the multifamily zoning bylaw. In December, I believe, the planning board hired Community Opportunities Group. Their chief planner, Courtney Starling, worked with the planning board and did an analysis of our existing zoning as well as our existing housing profile. And her work included data analysis, but also interviews with about a dozen stakeholders in the town. These included realtors, building officials, members of the planning board, people who are acquainted with the town as it is and what has been going on in the town recently. Among other things, her analysis indicated that our zoning and our existing town fabric were fundamentally incompatible with one another in a very meaningful way, which is to say that our zoning, especially in the R1 district and in the downtown district, didn't allow us to make any more of the Clinton that we all seem to like. The dimensional requirements were such that you couldn't build any of the streets that you see now in the R1 district any longer. You couldn't build many of the things that in downtown that exist any longer. And so in an effort to both to incentivize development in the more densely populated towns, more densely populated parts of town, insofar as zoning can do that, and to qualify to a degree proposals for multifamilies in the less densely populated parts of town, these articles are proposed. The first is Article 3500, which is a mixed-use downtown residential bylaw, which would allow for the as-of-right development of dwelling units on the upper floors of buildings in the downtown, in the BR district, and also allow for that to happen by special permit in the C district and in the R1 district. This effectively would allow for the owners of buildings that are currently have unoccupied, vacant upper floors to allow them some certainty in making investments in their property that have the possibility or likelihood of yielding a return. I've lived here for 20 years. I can tell you that the unoccupied storefront, the unoccupied upper floors that existed in Clinton in 1998 when I moved here, with one exception, are still unoccupied. So I think we need to understand that residential uses in the downtown are viable, they're attractive to the market, and they can be spurs to economic activity. I'd point out that Hudson, which we all kind of hold up as an ideal in our region, you could conjecture that the start of their downtown revitalization began with the development of the large affordable housing complex where the furniture stores used to be, heading out towards Stowe. This would allow, again, and I should say too, as you all know, there have to be 200 units of housing on the upper floors of buildings on High Street alone already. So this would allow the owners of those handful of buildings that are still underutilized to make modifications to their buildings to allow for residential units. The bylaw specifies a minimum unit size depending on the number of bedrooms. So this is kind of to discourage people who are just trying to cram in as many units as possible. It stipulates that that the ground floors need to remain in commercial use with a maximum, I think, of 20% of the first floor area can be allowed for uses that are ancillary to the upper floor development. That would be circulation, the mailboxes, those kinds of things. Also stipulates that any addition to a building of over 25% floor area would constitute a new building, which is allowed under the zoning bylaw but has a slightly different set of regulations. It also stipulates a parking requirement of at least one off-street parking space per residential unit. It also makes clear that it allows for cross-parking agreements which already exist in our bylaw. Under our current bylaw, if you have a parking load that you cannot satisfy on site, we allow you to demonstrate that you've entered into an agreement with an adjacent party that provides you the parking you need. And this correlates back to the parking study we did in 2017, which demonstrated that the utilization of off-street parking spaces in downtown, of which there are hundreds, I can't remember the numbers, but there are as many off-street parking spaces as there are on-street parking spaces. The utilization of those off-street parking spaces is something around 30%. So there may be opportunity for mutual benefit, for people to enter agreements of mutual benefit. In short, and then ancillary to that proposed change, there are some amendments to other tables of uses, Section 130, which is in the table of uses, Section 4130, which stipulates dimensional requirements, and then Section 5100, which is relative to parking spaces. These are changes that go along with the proposed Section 3500, which again would allow for residential development of the upper floors, buildings in the BR district.
Okay. Any questions for members of the board with regard to Article 40?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
just to be clear, so you feel that the parking requirements stated here can be serviced by existing inventory?
The numbers suggest that they can be. It would have to be an agreement between two private parties. Any applicant would have to demonstrate that they have a bona fide agreement in place if they are to propose parking off-site. So the numbers will be suggested, but the proof will be in the pudding, and that will be the applicant's responsibility.
Thank you.
Yeah, just to follow up, they would have to have some sort of parking plan, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Did I understand you to say that the requirement is that there would be one parking space for every residential unit?
Yes, that's what is proposed in the downtown.
I mean, understanding that if it's a married couple, there's 2 cars.
Yeah.
And if they have a kid who's over 16, there's 3.
It's not likely that there'd be kids. It's more likely that they might be a non-family household of 2 adults living together. As an aside, I don't know if you saw that today, the Census Bureau released the latest data on births, and the birth rate is at a 32-year low. So what we're seeing is an emergence of non-family households and transitioning people through life to different kinds of residential requirements where kids aren't often part of the package.
Well, those could be more like a condominium, which are
Apartments
notoriously,
or condominiums.
notoriously don't have a lot of children in them. They're more just
Yeah.
couples, older couple, that type of thing.
Yeah,
More
the
than
suggestion is
2
for
bedrooms,
one space per unit. That's what's proposed. Again, it becomes kind of a thing of marketing. If you're going to market to people who are going to have more than 1 car, then you may not be successful. Given the area of some of the buildings, though, that still are without upper floor uses, these are very small lots. So again, you get the situation where it's not really may not be practical to accommodate on-site parking, even on the undeveloped lots, which there are 2 principally.
Any other questions from members of the board? There being none, what is the pleasure of the board with regard to Article 40?
Motion to include Article 40 on the warrant, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded to include Article 40. Is there any discussion? There being none, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed, motion's carried. Article 41, to see if the town will vote to amend the zoning bylaws of the town of Clinton by inserting a new section 7300, conversion of existing structures.
Mr. Chairman, this would propose to restore a section of the bylaw that was eliminated in 2001, which had previously existed, and it would allow by special permit for existing structures to be converted to multifamily dwellings by special permit in the R1 and R2 district, and as of right will be our district. The intent is to, again, to acknowledge changes in the housing, in desired housing inventory, to allow for investment in existing structures, particularly older structures that abound in our R1 district especially. This would establish a minimum living area for eligibility of 2,400 square feet, so this would likely mitigate against, again, people just trying to cram stuff into houses that are too small. Also stipulates a minimum unit size, which is indicated there in the bylaws you see. And it stipulates that additions to the structure may not exceed 10% of the building area. That's in conjecture to be that if you need to add a second means of egress, that kind of thing, it can be accommodated. Also stipulates a parking requirement, which is listed separately, but it's basically, the parking requirement is by unit type, by bedroom type, so it goes from 1 space for a studio up to 2 spaces for a 3-bedroom above, 1.5 spaces for a 2-bedroom unit. So these would be the on-site parking requirements that would accompany this. Again, this proposes to put back something that was in the zoning until 2001, was taken out, quite frankly, in a different time. But I think we're seeing a change in housing demands. We're seeing the need for people to transition to houses, to downsize. We think we have some inventory in town that may be amenable to that. Certainly, if you live in the R1 district in town, the likelihood that there isn't already a multifamily house on your street is very low. And this would allow for us to, again, to perpetuate the fabric of the town that exists, and that I think is one of the attractive parts of the town.
Okay, any questions from members of the board? Oh, I would just like to understand this a little better. So specifically,
Yes.
R1 and R2 and existing structures. Could you just give me an example of what exactly are we talking about old factory buildings? Are we talking about?
No, these would be residential structures.
Okay.
Have at least 50 years in age. They would be residential structures.
Okay.
No. In fact, one of the things that's proposed, and that I'll get to a little bit later, is that while we already have a planned unit development for the conversion of existing factories into residential units, the bylaw proposes to make it clear that, for new development, that it's not allowed in the industrial zone. And our planner's argument is that your inventory in that area is already pretty scarce. Why would you want to, why would you want to take it out of play as potentially industrially developed sites?
So this would make it easier for someone to add an in-law apartment?
Well, that's kind of the funny thing, because this actually sits in the legal limbo. We have an in-law, an accessory apartment bylaw already, but there have been some concerns expressed since accessory apartments became a norm, in that the idea is that you're creating it for a family member. What happens 10 years down the road when you sell the property? What is the relationship of that unit to your deed, to zoning? This would make it clear that we're creating legal dwelling units that are not deed restricted or anything.
So I'm really just trying to understand
Sure.
exactly what's going on here.
Mm-hmm.
Berlin Street, is
Mhm.
that an R1 district?
Parts of it are.
Huh? Okay, well,
believe
let's
so.
say my house is in an R1 or R2 district.
Yep.
And it's well over 50 years old.
Yep.
What could I do with my house? And I'm not planning to do
Sure.
a single thing.
First, you'd have to demonstrate that the living area of your house, which is defined in zoning, was greater than 2,400 square feet.
Okay,
So if it's greater than 2,400 square feet, the likelihood that it could support 2 viable dwelling units it becomes conceivable.
Okay.
So,
All
so
right.
if you had a house that was large enough to support more than one dwelling unit, you could apply to the planning board for a special permit to make that conversion.
Okay. All right, now I understand.
You
Okay.
can take a big old house and break it into maybe 2 apartments or 2 condos, something like that, if it,
You could.
okay.
You could. Right now, we don't allow that. I don't know if our market is quite there, but a number of towns, a number of municipalities have done very well, you know, by allowing these kinds of conversions. Quite frankly, I'm not sure that our market is there right now, but right now, it's can't even be entertained as a possibility.
Okay, now I understand. Any other questions? Being none, what's the pleasure of the board with regard to Article 41?
Mr. Chair, move we accept Article 41 as written.
Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion made and second to accept Article 41. Is there any discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed, motion's carried. Article 42, to see if the town will vote to amend the zoning bylaws of the town of Clinton by inserting regulations and standard related to multifamily housing, including amendments to Section 4130, Section 5100, and inclusion of a new Section 9457, site plan design standards for multifamily housing. So that's what it is, so.
True. These go along with both of the previous articles, but really Amendment 4130 is to basically proposes no change other than to, in the BR district and C district, to stipulate a lot area for multifamily and to make it clear in the industrial district that it's not allowed. Our previous zoning has, for the BR district, for the C district, and for the I district, says NA in each of those columns, and it's a long-standing concern of the planning board that how to interpret that. Does that mean not allowed or not applicable? This makes it clear that relative to the area requirements, that the lot area requirement in the BR district is 5,000 square feet, which is the underlying lot area requirement for any use in the district. In the C district, similarly, that is 12,000, and that it's not allowed in the I district. So and then Section 5100 modifies the table of parking requirements to show the number of parking spaces that are required for multifamily in the R1 and R2 by special permit. Section 9457 would articulate a set of design standards for new multifamily construction. And the planning board has asked that that be included to give potential developers some indication of what expectations they have for design.
Okay, any questions regarding Article 42? Being none, what's the pleasure of the board with regard to Article 42? Is
Motion to accept as written.
there a second? The motion's made and seconded to accept Article 42. Is there any discussion? There being none, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? Motion's carried. Article 43. See, the town will vote to amend the zoning bylaws of the town of Clinton to insert a variety of other amendments, including but not limited to allowing for multiple principal structures on the same lot by special permit, altering a lot area computation, altering parking area design requirements, allowing a waiver of the land use ratio for mill conversion plan developments by special permit, and clarifying special permit requirements for site plan review and plan requirements.
This really is kind of a miscellaneous category to pick up some typos in the existing zoning and to change some terms to bring them into more prevalent usage in most instances. So this is kind of a catch-all for other things that came up. Section 4110, our zoning currently limits lot development to one structure per lot. We have seen in recent years through the special permit process that has been waived. Quite frankly, it's not always certain that one structure per lot is the best way to accomplish a complex project. This is a kind of a legacy of zoning from the 60s and 70s when people wanted everything spread out. So it's proposed that not more than one structural, no, that remains such, but that the planning board be given explicit approval to waive that requirement in a special, by special permit, if it's preferable, to improve site design. It basically gives the planning board authority to consider a better idea relative to the number of structures on it. Amendment to section 4230. This is one of the refinements to the multifamily bylaw. It addresses proposals in the R2 district. It says for lot area computation that if you are making a proposal where there's a lot area requirement, section 4230, I just want to make sure I'm in the right section here, that your computation excludes areas underwater or steep slopes, which are slopes of more than 50% or more. We've had some applications in the last couple of years where very large lots that are mostly swamps have been proposed for large multifamily developments where the buildings are all built on a little spit of land that's dry. I think it would be more clear and more consistent with the intent of the bylaw to make it explicit that those lands should not be included in any computation that yields a unit count. Section 5100 is, there are a couple of changes to the parking requirements. One is in 5123. It basically says that the planning board may offset parking for the provision of, let's see, what does it say here? Any reduction in area for parking because of these joint use provisions may be required as a reserved landscape parking space. Such area should be treated at the rate of 180 square feet per parking space. That is 4230. The reason I point that out is that we're requiring that if you basically do the efficient thing on parking, that you set it aside as open space, but that the current zoning for Illinois, looks up 4230. No, that's not the one, I'm sorry, 5123. Forgive me, it's been as long a night for me as it is for you. Right now, our 180 square feet is the size of an average parking space. Right now, we're requiring that for that offset that you provide 400 square feet of open space for everything, if you can reduce your parking area, which is absurd. To say that, we'll relieve you from paving 180 square feet if you give us 400 square feet of open space. It's not practical. So it just makes it clear that if as proposed, that the trade-off is a more equitable and rational trade-off. Is that clear? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay. It makes it clear that there's some other changes to the parking requirement. Require that maneuvering aisles should be set back a minimum of 5 feet. That 5168 requires that in certain parcels that parking cannot be stacked. If you're parking for employees or more than 3 tenants, you can't stack the parking so that people are obligated to move their cars. Let's see, off-street parking facilities shall be designed with parking facilities located to the side and or behind principal structures. In no case shall a parking space be located between the front line and the front facade of the principal structure unless authorized by a special permit. That kind of that's a recommendation of the planner to bring it into conformance with prevalent practice. Amendment to section 7100, which is flexible development, makes only one change to the word in the first sentence. Is the basic maximum number of dwelling units allowed in flexible development shall not exceed the number of units which can reasonably expect to be developed under a conventional plan. Only the units there should agree. Right now it says the number of units shall not exceed the number of lots, where it should say the number of units. The base number shall not exceed the number of units. It's a simple getting agreement in your sentences. Type of buildings, any combination of single, two-family residential structures. Right now in the flexible development, which hasn't been used in a long time, buildings are limited to, I think, 12 units. Not necessarily, that's kind of, it seems like an arbitrary number, so it's proposed that be changed. Amendment to section 7200, currently in section 7200, which is planned unit development, mill conversion. There's a requirement that if a parcel has more than one use proposed, that not more than 70% of the lot be used with one use. That doesn't seem practical. I know this is incredibly boring and dry stuff.
No, it's not. It's not. It's
So basically,
incredibly interesting.
yeah.
Could be marketed as a sleep aid for
I
insomnia.
agree with you. I guess the one that was a question last time, the amendment to section 9300, special permits. Right now, when a special permit granting authority awards a special permit, the planning board simultaneously has to do site plan review. It says so in section 9400, but it doesn't say so in section 9300. So what happens is applicants come in, they say, I'm going for a special permit, they read section 9300, and they don't realize that there's a concurrent review that they have to go through. So this just makes it clear. It already says in section 9400 you have to go, if you're in section 9300, you have to do site plan review. Now it says so in section 9300 too. Development impact statement proposes to simplify the requirements for the development impact statement, the professions that can supply them. And section D changes language on submittal requirements to bring it more into conformance with common use. It's really no more onerous than what we have now. It just changes some words as to who can do them and what drawings are submitted. So that's kind of the omnibus. It's really just kind of tidying up in that article.
Any questions from the board on Article 43?
No.
There being none, what's the pleasure of the board with regard to Article 43?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to accept Article 43 to the warrant.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded to accept Article 43. There any discussion? Under discussion, I would just say that my hat's off to the planning board. Really, you know, to get into the nuts and bolts of stuff like this, I mean, it really does take a lot of dedication and something, I don't know.
I agree. I think it's fantastic, and I think it's a step in the right direction.
Yeah.
So anyway, any other discussion? There being none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And opposed, motion.
Opposed.
Oh, you're opposed, one opposed. Okay. 3, 4, 1 opposed.
Okay.
Motion's carried. Article 45, this is the one for the real property.
Sure.
And it is to declare the real properties owned by the town and located at 329 High Street. That would be right at the corner of High and Water, and 172 Sterling Street. That is the old Supernauts building, as surplus properties and available for disposition, thereby enabling the Board of Selectmen to solicit proposals from potential purchasers of the properties in accordance with Chapter 30B of the Massachusetts General Laws. Mr. Duffy.
In short, these are two properties that have been taken through tax title and are now municipally owned properties. Bob, if you can correct me if I mischaracterize this. My understanding is that the Massachusetts law, absent this action by the town meeting, would only allow us to dispose of those properties by auction, in which case it would be a matter of the low bidder. These properties are both, as I'm sure you're familiar with both of them, are fated with a large degree of uncertainty. One of them, Supernaut, we've just had 8 years of somebody buying it for a bargain and land banking it. I'd submit that the redevelopment of that property, rehabilitation of each of these properties, has a value to the town. And so by declaring these surplus properties, we can continue the environmental assessments that are afoot on both properties to obtain some cost certainty. And the town can then decide how to dispose of the property and establish criteria for conveyance that are in accordance with the town's goals.
Okay, any questions on Article 45? There being none, what's the pleasure of the board with regard to Article 45?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we accept Article 45 to the warrant.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded to accept Article 45. There any discussion? There being none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Motion's carried. Is that it for you?
Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So,
Thank you.
I am sorry.
You said a lot.
I'm sorry to have bored you. It's dry stuff, but what can you do?
no, it's
Not at all.
But it's important.
Important stuff.
Thank you.
Thank you,
All right,
Philip.
so,
Mr. Chairman, if I may,
yes.
I move we include on the warrant Articles 1 through 5 as the fairly standard articles.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded to include Articles 1 through 5 as they are standard articles. It's been seconded. Is there any discussion? There being none, all in favor?
Aye.
Oh, and,
Mr. Chairman, if I could, you're gonna add one, the first article on the warrant is gonna be an article, town administrator just reminded me. We have to have, we're gonna have a temporary moderator for the town meeting because John Hogan resigned. So at the first action at the town meeting has to be to appoint a temporary moderator for the town meeting. So we're gonna have to have an article one on here for that, so, it's not on here now.
Mr. Chairman, I move that Article 1, newly numbered Article 1, be included on the warrant, authorizing a, what is it, temporary moderator.
Second.
motion's made and seconded to create a new Article 1, naming a temporary moderator for town meeting, given that that Mr. Hogan has resigned. Is there any discussion? No discussion? Okay, so all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed, motion's carried. Article 6,
Mr. Chairman, I move that we accept Article 6 on the warrant, but amend it to an amount of $20,000 as per a request from Wheat and approved or supported by the Finance Committee.
okay, this is the wheat article, and it is to raise and appropriate a transfer from available funds, $15,000 for wheat, and that was amended to $20,000. Motion's made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Being none, all in favor of Article 6?
Aye.
Article 6 is included.
Mr. Chairman, I move Article 7 as printed in our warrant. It's a standard article that we have to have going forward to adjust revolving fund accounts.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded to include Article 70, which involves revolving fund accounts. Is there any discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed, motion's carried. Article 8.
Mr. Chairman, I move Article 8, but amend the amount to $30,000 as per discussions with the Finance Committee and our own board when we were deliberating the rate split on taxes. We said this is one of the things we wanted to use to address that.
The assessors are aware too.
Right.
Okay, so Article 8 is to raise $30,000 instead of $15,000 to be used to continue the senior tax rebate program for fiscal year 2020. Is there any discussion? There being none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And opposed, motion's carried. Article 9,
Mr. Chairman, I move Article 9 in the amount of $150,000.
Second.
Article 9 is to transfer $150,000 to the Health Insurance Trust Fund. Is there any discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed, motion's carried. Article 10,
Mr. Chairman, I move Article 10 in the same amount, $150,000 to the stabilization fund.
Second.
so Article 10 is $150,000 to the stabilization fund. Any discussion? There being none, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed, motion's carried. Article 11,
We've already
it's
done
already
Article
been
12.
okayed, and so is
12.
Article 12. Article 13,
Mr. Chairman, on Article 12, just to add the amount on there,
right.
based on what the board has done tonight, there was $3 million for High Street, 1.5 for roads, and 200,000 for drainage, so that's 4.7 million. So I don't know if the board wanted to transfer at least 4.7, or maybe we'll get 3.5. Yeah, there's 3.5 in there now, but whether you want to keep that amount and put in the amount that you're gonna spend,
Difference.
or dip into the amount that's in there. I mean, I think, out of the, whatever, 6 that may be remaining, I think, if you leave a couple million in for the landfill, I don't think 4 or 4.5 would be
4.5.
outrageous, yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I move Article 12 in the amount of $4.5 million.
I'll second.
Article 12 has been moved in the amount of $4.5 million. Is there any discussion? There being none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And opposed, motion's carried. Article 13. And that is unpaid bills to Reganini's Hall Memorials for,
Bless you.
excuse me, $1,077, and Darrell Sutterly for $540. What's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, make a motion we accept Article 13.
Second.
Article 13 is, motion is made to accept it. Is there any discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. Article 15,
Or just as, Mr. Chair, just to go through for 14, that was a placeholder that we put on about talking about early retirement incentive, maybe trying to put some money towards that, but, you know, as the budget process is completing, I think we're gonna hold on that. So if the board is willing to remove that article.
do we have to,
Yeah, the ones that I have strike
We have to
through are
remove-
ones
we have to
recommending to remove, if
Okay.
that's okay. with the
Motion to
board,
remove
just to
Article
acknowledge
14.
that.
Second.
motion's been made and seconded to remove Article 14. Is there any discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed, motion's carried. Article 15, see if the town will vote to appropriate $225,000 to be used for the support of cable access related services, programming, and equipment. What's the pleasure of the board with regard to Article 15?
Mr. Chairman, make a motion we accept Article 15 to the warrant.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded, and to accept Article 15. Is there any discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed, motion's carried.
The
So
next
now-
two have been approved, 16, 17 approved, 18 would be a removal.
Yeah,
That money, Mr. Conley can speak to, is, I think, being transferred.
The Finance Committee indicated their interest or desire was to incorporate that $100,000 into the school department budget rather than leaving it as a standalone article.
okay, so we'll accept the motion to remove Article 18.
So move.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded to remove Article 18. Is there any discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And opposed, motion's carried. Article 19, it's $640,000 to be expended by the Clinton Public Schools for the replacement of the roof of the Clinton Middle School. What's the pleasure of the board?
Motion to include Article 19.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded to include Article 19. There any discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? Motion's carried.
Motion to remove Article 20.
Second.
Second.
Motion's to remove Article 20. Is there any discussion?
Just under discussion, Mr. Chairman, the Finance Committee indicated that given that there was a developing plan to do something at the middle school, whether it's a renovation or new construction, that it would be inadvisable to spend that amount of money on something that might not be needed in a couple of years.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. There any discussion? There being none, all in favor?
Aye.
And motion's carried. So Article 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, up to 28.
29, actually.
Up to 29. Article 20, those are all the public works articles previously discussed. Article 29, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate $200,000. That sum to be expended by the police chief for the purchase and installation of cloud-based record management. What's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion we accept Article 29 to the warrant.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded to accept Article 29. There any discussion? There being none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And opposed, motion's carried. Article 30 is $550,000 to be used by the fire department for a new fire engine. What's the pleasure of the board?
Motion to include Article 30.
Second.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded to include Article 30. Is there any discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed, motion's carried. Article 31, we need a motion to remove it.
Motion to remove Article 31, Mr. Chairman. And I believe, Mike, could you clarify that the Finance Committee incorporated that $10,000 in the emergency management budget?
Okay. So motion's made and seconded. Any discussion? That was for $10,000 for the purchase of a four-wheel drive vehicle for Clinton Emergency Management Agency. Any, there being no discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed, motion's carried. Article 32 is to remove to $7,500 to be expended by the Bigelow trustees for the purchase and installation of a heating cooling system.
Mr. Chairman, again, that's from the Finance Committee. They preferred to incorporate that amount in the Facility Department budget.
Okay. So has the motion been?
Motion to remove.
Second.
Motion is made and seconded to remove. There any discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed, motion's carried. Article 33 is the Clinton Conservation Commission, and it is a request to authorize the filing of special legislation to allow for the Board of Selectmen to appoint 2 alternate members of the Conservation Commission for staggered terms not to exceed 3 years, whereby the chair of the commission may designate an alternate member to sit on the commission in the case of absence, inability to act, or conflict of interest. So that's what it is. What's the pleasure of the
Motion
board?
to include Article 33.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded to approve Article 33. There any discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed, motion's carried. Article 34, to vote to accept the provisions under Chapter 32, Section 28, to identify members of the Clinton Retirement Board for expenses of any civil action which is being defended by an attorney employed by said board, or to, well, yeah, so that's what it is.
Motion to incorporate Article 34.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded to incorporate Article 34. Any discussion? There being none, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed, motion's carried. Article 35, to see if the town will vote to amend the administrative bylaws by adding a new article captioned transfers from the landfill enterprise fund to the capital projects and infrastructure improvement stabilization fund, as so it's set forth below. So I will just waive the rest of the reading and say, Michael, can you just give us a brief explanation as to Article 35?
Sure, if I may defer to
Or
town council.
town council,
Yeah, it's fine, it's,
whoever.
so back when the special legislation was passed in 2018, we were able to transfer money from the enterprise fund for the capital projects and infrastructure improvements to the, no, the landfill enterprise fund to the capital projects and infrastructure improvement fund. That legislation required us to set up a bylaw to govern the transfers. It's really governed by statute, so that's really, so this bylaw was mandated by that legislation.
Oh, all right.
So section 1 just tells you the purpose, it tells you that's why we're doing it. Section 2 just tells the mechanism of transfer, which is, by statute. I think the most important section that we had talked about when we passed at town meeting, when we voted for the stabilization fund, that vote was that any transfers out of the capital projects and infrastructure stabilization fund would be subject to guidelines drafted by the Board of Selectmen. So section 3 is that use. So once this passes, it's got to go to the AG's office anyway for approval. In the interim, we'll have to come up with guidelines for the use of the stabilization fund. So it's pretty. This is a pretty generic bylaw, really. But again, it was mandated by the special legislation.
Okay, so any questions from members of the board? Being none, what's the pleasure regarding Article 35?
Motion to include Article 35, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
A motion's made and seconded to include Article 35. Is there any discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed, motion's carried. Article 36, is that the library article?
36.
So that's done.
37's been done.
37, that's not been done, has it? No. So Article 37. To see if the town will vote to amend the administrative bylaws of the town of Clinton by deleting Article 3, duties of the selectmen, and inserting a new section to establish new guidelines relative to disposition of surplus town property. So I assume this is town council again?
Right, Mr. Chair, as I mentioned to the board, this past year, I've had a number of inquiries, 3 or 4 inquiries from different departments that are looking to dispose of surplus property in the department, but the current bylaw indicates anything above $500 needs to come before the Board of Selectmen for approval. So, which was, again, many years ago, as the library talked about today. So trying to find a way to modernize that. We asked town council to take a look at it, and this is what he came up with, that would bring us from 0 to the state procurement statutes, which is, I believe, $10,000. So anything in that range could be governed by this new requirement.
So it really has, this proposed new section 11 really has, you know, three phases to it. The first one is that if the department has property that's less than $500, the department head can make the determination to surplus that, but it just has to provide notice of that to the chief procurement officer, which is the town administrator. So if it's less than $500, they'd have to, you know, provide that estimate, let the chief procurement office know that, and then they can dispose of it. Between $500 and $2,500, they'd have to submit a proposal to the chief procurement officer with a good faith estimate of what this surplus property is worth, and then the chief procurement officer would make a disposition of that property. Anything above $2,500 would have to go to the Board of Selectmen to make a determination on the disposition of that surplus. And we could have gone higher. I mean, you know, because like the town administrator just mentioned, the statute says $10,000. $10,000 you have to go out, you know, and do it per the statute. The way we've set this up, we're making that $2,500. I don't think we have that much. It's more the smaller stuff. But right now, the way this is set up, we'll go with $2,500. If that ends up being too burdensome, then we want to maybe expand that to $5,000. We can always do that, or $7,500 next year or the following year. But this is just, you know, we got to start somewhere. So.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's a good process to at least give a formal process. The departments know how to proceed. So I appreciate it.
Motion to incorporate that article.
I'll second.
Motion is made and seconded to include Article 37. Is there any discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed, motion's carried. Article 38.
Motion to remove Article 38. The reason being that we haven't drafted a comprehensive explanation of what would be allowed and wouldn't be allowed.
Okay.
I'll second.
Motion is made and seconded to remove Article 38, and that is abutter noise impacts. What's the, so motion's made and seconded. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
just my clarification, where'd this come from? Was this ours in the first place?
The building inspector
Okay.
put it out there as something we should consider, and it is something we should consider over the next year, but it's a complex issue that
Yep.
needs some refinement before we put it forward.
So we'll just maybe forward this over to June and we start talking
Right.
about goals and objectives?
Right, exactly.
Great.
The building inspector just indicated, you know, he's been here, you know, almost a year, that this came up one time during his time there. And there isn't anything specifically that speaks to it. If there's some hours of construction or, you know, people making excessive noise on their property with construction. So he just highlighted the issue. So it's something I just wanted to bring forward to the board. But as Mr. Connolly indicated, there's a lot of what ifs and parameters and, you know, what days and, you know, hours. So I think it just would behoove us all to really take some time to research it and come up with something that will work in all circumstances, and maybe next year pursue it with more detail.
Thank you.
Okay, so motion's made and seconded to remove Article 38. There any discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? Article 39 is to amend the administrative bylaws, adding a new article to adopt a stretch energy code as set forth below, and that is the article that we needed to begin to move towards the green community business. Michael, do you have anything to say about that, or is that a sufficient explanation?
Yeah, and I think it's, as the board's presentation they received from the state, it's something that we want to pursue green communities. It's something that would be needed. The designation nominations come up in October. So further down, there will be a consulting services, MRPC, to do all the review to get us in compliance for that designation in October. This is one of the things that the board can't do. It has to be done by town meeting. So if we want to make October designation, we would need to do it this town meeting. If we want to do next year's designation of 2020, then this could wait. But this is something that town council took a look at, and in other communities that he was familiar with, this is the language that other communities have adopted in order to meet their green communities requirements. So this would be pretty standard as to what other towns have done. So it's just a general bylaw adoption, and it's just, again, not critical this year, but it's something that we would need to do if we want to go to green community.
What's the pleasure of the board with regard to Article 39?
Mr. Chairman, make a motion that we accept Article 39 to the warrant.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded on Article 39 to accept it. Is there any discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed, motion's carried. Article 40 is done. Article 41 is done. Article 42 is done. 43 is done.
Motion to delete Article 44.
Motion is made to delete Article 44. That is the one that changed the number of marijuana retail licenses. My understanding is basically everyone agreed that we can wait and see and not hurt ourselves, and so we decided to do that. Was that seconded?
I'll second.
Okay, Artie, so the motion's made and seconded to remove Article 44. Is there any discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed, motion's carried. Article 45, I believe, is done. Article 46. That is to accept Prescott Lane as a public way. What's the pleasure of the board?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded to accept Article 46. Is there any discussion? There being none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And opposed, motion's carried. Article 47, see if the town will vote to accept the open space area consisting of 5.45 acres. And it's a village at Buffton Farm, so it's to accept some open space. What's the pleasure of the board?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded to accept Article 47. There any discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? Motion's carried. Article 48, to accept open space area consisting of 3.0 acres. And where is that? Well, somewhere. Somebody's
I
gonna
think
give us
that's Nathan
3
Heights, I'll
point.
put that in, I think that's at Nathan Heights, but I'll have to confirm
Yeah,
that.
we should know where it is, but,
Is that
someone's
40
gonna
is that
give us some
48?
open space.
Okay, we'll get something in there.
What's the pleasure of the board with regard to Article 48?
Motion to include for Article 48.
I'll second.
Motion's made and seconded to include it. Is there any discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And then to town, Article 49, to see if the town will vote to accept two lots as open space. That looks like, doesn't exactly say where either, but
Nathan Heights.
Nathan Heights.
Nathan Heights.
And, Mr. Chairman, if I may, these are all open space designations that were part of subdivisions that were approved by the planning board.
Yeah.
One comment on that, on the two lots there, lot 7 and lot 12, there was if my memory serves me correct, there was a potential issue that was raised, I think by the DPW superintendent. I can't recall if it was lot 7 or lot 12, this was something, but, so I'd like to have the flexibility just to get with Mr. McGowan and just confirm if he thinks maybe one of these lots we shouldn't take it this time, then have that. But I do remember, I haven't had a chance to talk, but I do remember that there was a potential problem, or not a problem, but a concern with one of these lots about if the town owned it, so.
Motion to incorporate Article 49, subject to revision by town council after consultation with the DPW superintendent.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded to accept Article 49, subject to review by town council after discussion with the director of DPW. Is there any discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
And,
Mr. Chair, we're asking that the board remove Article 50. That's something that has been done in the past previously.
I'll make a motion that we remove Article 50.
Second.
okay, motion's made and seconded to remove Articles 50. And is there any discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion's carried.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we include Articles 53 through 56 as citizens petitions. We have to include them.
Motion's
Second.
made- Yeah, motion's made and seconded to include Articles 53, 54, and 55, and 56. These are citizens petitions. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
regarding Article 53, can we just double check and see if they spell Super Summit with one M? Just, I'm not gonna vote for it if they can't spell Summit, but just to give them the benefit of the doubt. It's spelled S-U-M-I-T here. I don't know what that means, but
Oh, right.
just for
yeah.
spell checking.
Yeah, we'll double check the spelling. That was on the petition. That's how they spelled it on the petition, so, so we'll double check the corporation name and maybe that's,
Spelling counts.
yeah, right.
Super Summit.
Okay, so is there any other discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed, motion's carried. That concludes the review of the warrant. And we can move on to the fiscal year 2020 budget review. Are we going to do a comprehensive line-by-line?
No, we're not doing a comprehensive, I hope the subcommittee, we've summarized most of the conversations with the finance committee, the major issues. Most of the things that we had hoped to address, the situation isn't appropriate right now for us to, we resourced the funds that we thought we had available for larger contributions to OPEB and stabilization fund or to pay down the retirement. The other changes or agreements with the finance committee were the ones that we discussed about the assessor's tax rebate program and the incorporation and the wheat contribution and the incorporation of various items into the facility department. I'm trying to think of, there was something else that we hit on.
Snow removal?
We had put forward a proposition of fully funding, as
Snow
requested, snow removal. And again, it's a money issue. Our deficit every year is around $400,000 in addition to what we appropriate, $300,000 plus for snow removal. And I think we added 100. The finance committee agreed to
100,000.
increase the budget line item 100,000, and that will, assuming we have a normal winter, that will decrease the deficit going forward, and hopefully next year we can address it
Further.
further.
Okay.
Baby steps. And again, the same thing with the police and fire overtime account. They, finance committee is inclined to, I'm trying to find it here. They increased over last year. Where's police and fire? Approved last year for police overtime was 63,000, and requested was 180,000. The finance committee is recommending increasing that line item to 110,000 and see where that takes us, because every year there is line item transfers to balance that account, and they believe that that should be utilized first. And basically, it's the same thing with the fire overtime account. Last year's appropriation was 140, requested is 250, and the finance committee is recommending 180. And again, with the same line item transfers, they believe that that's about break even.
Okay. Any questions from members?
Yeah, just and quickly touching on the snow and ice removal, I know we talked about a better commitment on the town's part. Included in that facilities budget is money for, I believe, $90,000 for 2 new pieces of equipment. That's, in addition to snow removal, can also do other things, but it's good for sidewalk maintenance, and I think another labor, is that right in there?
Another laborer
Yep.
in that department.
Right, so that'll help with that commitment.
Any questions from members of the board or any of you guys about the 2020 budget? All right, we'll move on to administrative business, late night closings. The following establishments have requested late night closings for Saturdays in the month of June 2019. Clinton Turn Marine, Crystal Cafe, Tees Liberty Tavern, Ringside Cafe, Spruce Street Tavern, the Simple Man Saloon, and the Polish American Club. What's the pleasure of the board?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded to approve late night closings. Is there any discussion? There being none, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion's carried. Town hall use events, why don't we vote on these as a one
Motion to
vote?
approve the 3 requests, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
The 3 requests, Clinton High School graduation, a private wedding reception on 10/12/19, and the annual holiday Pops concert. Motion's made and seconded. There any discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion's carried. One-day liquor license request, Parks and Recreation, requesting a one-day beer and wine license for holiday Pops. What's the pleasure of the board?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded for the one-day liquor license. Is there any discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And motion's carried. Water, sewer, trash abatement, Superintendent of Public Works is requesting the amount of $1,113.04 from the last billing cycle for action by the board. What's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chair, I make a motion that we grant the water, sewer, and trash abatements in the amount of $1,113.04.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. There any discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? Motion's carried. Old and new business? Mass DOT traffic control agreement. The Selectmen have received a request from the Mass Highway Department to enter into a traffic control agreement for signage and pavement markings being installed as part of the High Street Route 110 construction project in Clinton. This requirement is required by the Federal Highway Administration to ensure that the ways within the blah, blah, blah. So, what's the pleasure of the board?
Make a motion that we grant the agreement, traffic control
Second.
agreement.
And just quickly, Mr. Chair, this is just for signage and pavement markings.
Right.
Down at by the fire station, we got federal money for that, and there were signals. So every time there's a federal money goes into it, whatever they enhance or put in, they just ask that you do an agreement that you will maintain it, so that it's not just done with their money for a year or two, and then,
Right.
we discontinue it. So, so this is at least isn't signalization, which normally we've done that in the past, but this one here was for signs. So the signs that are being put up in conjunction with that project, we need to keep them up, which we would want to do anyways. So.
So where are we? Yeah, you made a motion, and it was seconded?
Mm-hmm.
So any discussion? There being none, all in favor?
Aye.
And the motion's carried. The MRPC Consultant Services Agreement, the Montechusett Regional Planning Commission has provided an agreement for consultant services for technical assistance to pursue a green communities designation for Clinton. This agreement is being funded through a grant from the district local technical assistance. So what's the pleasure of the board? Do we have to do anything on this, Michael, or is this informational?
I think it's the actual agreement, so it would be if the board to.
We have to
enter
approve
into
this
that
agreement.
Between the town
Okay.
and MRPC.
Motion to approve the agreement, Mr. Chairman.
I'll second.
Motion's made and seconded to approve the agreement. Is there any discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? Reserve fund transfer for building inspector services. The transfer from the reserve fund is needed to cover costs associated with building inspector consulting services. What's the pleasure of the board?
Motion to approve the reserve fund transfer.
Second.
Motion's
Request.
made and seconded to approve the reserve fund transfer request. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
can we just get some background on this? Is this about what we expected and how much longer we're going to into this?
Right, this is for the consulting services to cover the building commissioner role until the current inspector gets certification. There is a series of 3 exams for that certification, and the person in that position has completed 2 of those exams, with the 3rd one that is coming up either this week or next week or so. So once that portion that requirement has been completed, we will then no longer need these consulting services. So this transfer would bring it up to date, and then we go from there with the current employee being able to sign off on all, any requirement that's needed by the town at that point.
And just, I'm trying to find it here, it's, what's it, 16? 16,000? The amount?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so that, just so people know where we're going forward, if that covered us how far?
That would be up until the current period, so it would have been from September until April.
All right, so anything going forward would be much smaller
Would be,
than that.
yeah, it would be a small balance, yeah, for
Thank
that
you.
point.
Any other discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
None opposed, motion carried. The Clinton Housing Authority has received a grant in the amount of $202,792 from the United States Housing and Urban Development Capital Fund account, and that needs to be approved by the local government body for them to accept the funding. So what's the pleasure of the board? Does anybody want to make a motion to
Mr.
accept the
Chairman,
funding?
I'll save my comment for discussion, but I'll make a motion that we approve the acceptance of the grant.
I'll second.
Motion's made and seconded to approve the acceptance of $202,000. Is there any discussion, Mr.
Just
Connolly?
a discussion, Mr. Chairman. Apparently, the Housing Authority isn't correct in their analysis that they don't need anything from the town of Clinton, and they're independent and autonomous. And this is just another example of where they're wrong.
Well, perhaps we should refuse to do it, but anyway, is there any other discussion? All right, so,
No, just under discussion, I have to agree with Bill on that one. Selectman Colley makes some good points. This is about boards working together. We should be all doing that and not picking and choosing when it's, when it's right for them or what they think is right. We're all in this together. We could sit here tonight and say, no, we're not going to approve it, but again, that's $202,000 for the Clinton Housing, for some programs for the Clinton Housing Authority, for those housing units throughout the town of Clinton. So I'm obviously going to vote for it, but obviously in the past frustrating with the housing authorities' choices in the past. So with
okay,
that being said.
any other discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
None opposed, motion's carried. Polish picnic donation request, the Board of Selectmen has received a request for a donation from the Civic Fund towards the 6th annual Polish picnic, and that all proceeds will be donated to the Paula Center. What's the pleasure of the board?
Did we donate anything last year?
Last
Yeah.
year.
What was the amount?
Just say the same amount.
Yeah. All right, well, I'll make a motion that we grant the Polish picnic donation request for $100.
And Mr. Chair, I just would ask if that motion could be, the event is in the summer in July, so if it could be for that period for the next fiscal year to make the donation in July. So the board can approve it now,
Yeah.
but just ask that it be paid in July.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, was there a motion and a second?
I made a motion.
I'll second.
Yeah.
Just under discussion, we did, previously, we had asked for a larger amount in that fund that we make these contributions out of. And with the finance committee, they agreed to increase that to, that account by $1,000.
Oh, good.
So I'd make a motion to amend the donation to $250.
I'll second.
Okay, motion is made to amend the article to $250. Is there any discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
So that was the amendment. Now on the original motion. Is there any discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
And that motion carries. This brings us to goals and objectives and committee reports. I would entertain a motion to defer discussion on those, as we have just talked a lot about goals and objectives, and unless somebody has a committee
Can
report
I
that they
give a
just...
quick plug for
Okay.
cleanup day? Cleanup day's finally here on
Oh, that's
Saturday.
right, too.
Saturday, the 18th, from 9 to noon. We'll be gathering, it's rain or shine, on the other side of the park, between the police station and the Icon Museum. If you have any questions, send me an email at skerrigan@clintonma.gov, or track me down on Facebook. Terry Angano is also organizing this, so if you can find him. We welcome anybody. If there's a part of town that you're interested in, or if you just want to come out and help, all are welcome.
Yeah, and the Clinton DPW will be assisting in the supplying of trash bags, pick sticks, those type of things, and going around later in the day, or probably Monday, picking up the trash bags as well that we collect. So,
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Kerrigan. Any other committee reports? There being none, we'll accept a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
second.
Motion is made and seconded to adjourn. I would just like to say under the discussion that this is not the longest Board of Selectmen meeting
No,
I have ever been
mine either.
at. Just to forestall any comments
Longest
from
one
Mr.
that I've ever
Connolly,
been at.
I have to say.
Motion on the table.
Motion's on the table, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And opposed, the meeting's adjourned. Thank you out there who was ever still up and watching.
They're sleeping at this point. Oh, you need a caffeine.